What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another very special Pokemon Rants. I've had the pleasure of speaking with many people in the hobby, and one of the common questions I always like to ask is who do you admire and who do you look up to? And there is one name that rightfully rises to the top of that list nearly every single time, and that's Rusty at TCA Gaming. But how is it that one man can rise to the top of so many minds? Is it through marketing dollars, celebrity promotion, or even endorsements that has brought this man to the humble throne? No, not even close. It is instead years of dedication, hard work, daily improvement, and most of all, the deepest desire to do right by everyone that he encounters and leave this place better than he found it. This is something you cannot buy. It must be earned. And as we often do here, we're going to dive deep with our guest today and revisit many of the stories that has brought Rusty along this journey, while hopefully unearthing new life and new gems not yet discussed. So it is my deepest pleasure, with the sincerest gratitude, to welcome Rusty to Pokemon Wonder. Rusty, welcome.
Thanks, man. That was a heck of a time you just gave me right there with all those kind words. I don't know if I deserve all that, but I definitely appreciate it.
You do. You do. I know you're very humble about it, but as I said, you've rightfully earned the place of this humble throne that you currently sit upon. Years of dedication. I've often also thought, Rusty, that we should probably skip sometimes these basic introductions. And I've heard you say it probably 1,000 times in your story, and I think they may probably get tired of talking about these things. But then I also think about our responsibility as content creators and in some ways historians of the Pokemon community to make sure that we reiterate those beginnings and give them new life, because they may not find the 100 videos that we have back in the log somewhere. And having this fresh and new for everybody helps keep the hobby alive and helps give that a new perspective. So if you would be so kind, sir, give us a little introduction to how you got into to the hobby and to Pokemon, and we'll jump it off from there.
Well, I mean, I played as a kid, so I mean, really, it started there. I remember buying my first cards. Well, it was in the lunchroom at my elementary school. I was in fifth grade. I
Wow.
brought $5 and I got 10 Pokemon cards, 50 cent. That was the going market price back then.
Oh.
And a fossil Kabuto. That was my first card. I think there was an Ammonite. I can't remember what else was in there. And the only reason I'm remembering this right now specifically is because I actually had somebody ask me recently about that. But for a while, I mean, Pokemon was just kind of the thing that all the kids did. And eventually I got into Yu-Gi-Oh when I went to middle school, and just kind of got away from that until got away from the Pokemon side of things for the most part until I went off to college. I did buy a base set box when I was 16 for $100.
Hmm.
I used my older brother, his eBay account. I used his eBay account. He ended up giving $100 back to me. He gave it to me. He's like, "Happy
It was
birthday,
a gift.
brother!" Because
Okay.
he's in the military. He's quite a bit older than me, and
Okay.
he he come down, he visited. He lives up in Wisconsin now with his kids. He gave me the $100 back, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I had a base set box for $100. I never got in there when they were $25, but I got in pretty low. And then when I went out to college, I just started buying and selling because my roommate, he collected Pokemon cards. Like, we'd go to Walmart and we'd go to the Targets, and we would find those level X 10s for $10 on sale, or
Yeah, the
whatever
Mewtwo.
it was at the time that we could find. Kmart's.
Yeah.
I remember going to a Kmart and
Oh,
finding old
Kmart. Yeah.
EX Dragon Frontiers blisters there. I mean, it was just stuff that nobody wanted, and it was just something we enjoyed. And then, but by the time I graduated, I was ready to pursue it full time. My teaching degree for high school education was good for 3 years. I got my license, and so I was like, you know what,
Okay.
I'm going to try this. I'm going to try Pokemon first, and yeah, I quickly found out it pays way better. It's an easy passion that I could pursue. Had much more flexibility with my time, and
Right.
that's pretty much what I've stuck with ever since.
Yeah, you graduated in 2012, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, from college. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had an associate's in what specifically?
It was a bachelor's in high
A
school math.
bachelor's.
It was high school math
Okay.
education, so I was going to be a math teacher.
Okay. What was the drive behind a math teacher? What was the reason behind choosing that as your potential career path?
So I always liked math. I mean, that was just something that come easy to me. It made sense. A teacher couldn't tell me I was wrong with math, where they could with English. If I wrote something and they didn't like the way I wrote it, they'd give me a B, and I'm like, "Well, why am I getting a B?" And they're like, "Well, you didn't explain this thoroughly." And I'm like, "I stated what it said." And but so, anyways, math. I like math, and then of course I actually went into the education field because I always wanted. I knew that I wanted to have a family, but I also wanted to have time to spend with my family. And I knew as
Mm,
an educator, at least I would have some time during the summers that would be off, and then I would have a similar schedule as my kids because if they went to school,
mm.
they'd have certain holidays off. Teachers, they have teacher work days, but a lot of times they have a very similar schedule.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we know a couple of teachers in the hobby. Some of them wives, some of them the actual poke YouTubers themselves, like Matt, for example, Pokemon Classics. But the teaching jobs are very consuming. I mean, it's homework
Yeah,
and
I
reviews
can
at
see that.
night. It's working on the weekends. So I definitely think you've chosen the path that gives you more freedom with your kids. That's for sure. Yeah. And you can still use your teaching degree to help them with the math homework. So it all worked out. It all worked out. Um, Tell me actually a little bit more about the background on your history because I know there was a time period when you were starting out. This is before the family and before being married, where your cost of living was so low. I think you mentioned a couple of times somewhere around $800 a month. You were able to kind of say, if I had to live on that, I could, and that kind of gave you that freedom to say, let me pursue Pokemon, because if it was obviously with the wife and kids, it would have been a much different story at that time. So maybe
Right.
speak a little bit about that and why you or how you were able to navigate that path based on that time frame.
So the $800 a month, I remember running those numbers in my head when I was working during the summers for somebody else. He was local,
Mm.
kind of local, Greensboro. I mean, he's
Yep.
about half
Yep.
north of where you're at, kind of east from
Yep.
where I'm at. But and I knew that I could rent a place. My parents, they rented their entire life. It cost them $500 a month, and to me, really, that was high for where they were at. I realize it's like super low now, and it's probably low for most people where they live. But I knew of trailers that you could rent, 3, 4, $500, no problem. And the way I
Mm.
saw it, I could live off the food, and really all I'd have to do is take care of the utilities. And so I knew that like the bare minimums, if it was just me, I didn't care. Cause when I was at college, like I took no food plan, for that,
Mm.
it was after the first 2 years. I didn't take any food plans those last 2 years. And I'd made $1,000 work, just
Mm.
eating. What I would do is I like the water pancakes. You could get a lot of meals out of that. Ramen
Yep.
noodles was a staple. I
Yeah, of
like
course.
doing the spaghetti with just the regular sauce. You can get a good meal out of that. You could
Yep.
make your own pizzas. Like if you go and buy like the little 50-cent packets where you mix the water in, you make the dough. All you got to do is get a dollar can of sauce, and then you've got cheese and your pepperonis, and you've got a really good 3 pound $5 pizza, or 3 pound $5 pizza. And if you wanted to, you could splurge and you could go to Domino's at the time when they had the 555 deal. This was in the middle of
Yeah.
Raleigh too. So as long as you found a buddy who would buy a pizza too, you could go get a pizza, pick it up, not have to pay the tax, tip, driver, all that stuff, for less than $6. So I mean, it was an easy for me. I knew that I could make the food thing work, and I knew that if I could rent a place where all I have to worry
Mm.
about is my water and my utility, like the utilities for like the power, maybe with the internet, but at the time I could run off the internet from my phone. And if you constantly call up your internet company, you can re-up it and tell them you're going to turn it off and get that price knocked back down to 29.99,
Yeah.
for every, a price for a month. So I knew that I could make it work. But
Mm.
thankfully I never actually had to live off of that small amount.
Right.
When I was in college, my room and board was taken care of because that was included in my tuition, and I had grants and I had scholarships that took care of that. So really, the only thing that I had to worry about was my food, and usually I had leftover money from the grants and scholarships that could take care of that.
Mm.
And usually, like I said, I allocated about $800 to $1,000 for food, and that was for the entire semester.
Wow. Wow. Well, yeah, thankfully it didn't come to that, but it definitely is a aggressive plan. But it actually stems from a lot of what your childhood was like. I remember there were some times you were speaking about growing up, and you guys would just have rice and hamburger, and it was just the way that you grew up, and that's the way many of us grew up. Mine was
Yeah.
ham sandwiches. I mean, that was what we had all the time.
Yeah.
And that, or my mom, she worked at a pizza joint, so when she got off, she get to bring home some leftover pizzas, and that's what we would have for dinner. And yeah, eating like that can save you a lot of money. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And you compare that to where we are now with the family and kids, and yeah, going out to eat this couple $100 event for sure,
Oh man,
easily,
it's crazy
easily.
now thinking about it.
Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Before we continue, let me just show a little bit of respect here to everybody else in the chat as well. I just want to say thanks everybody for joining. Saw Pokey Chef in here early. Panga, IFOMO, really appreciate you guys coming in. Saw Drew in here as well. I know you're probably already gone, Drew. You got to go out there and manage PK's live. He's going live in a few minutes. Got my wife's in here as well. Good to see you, sweetheart. Mr. Walrus, always here to support my guests and not me. That's okay. He's always fun to have in the chat. Good to see you, Walrus. Felipe is in the house as well. We got old school Pokemon. Hey, Nick. Good to see you, buddy. Pongo. So many great people. Really appreciate everybody stopping by. Thanks for saying hi. If I missed any chats, I'll try to catch up here in a few minutes. Just wanted to say hey, and thanks for coming in. SDC, I see you as well, buddy. Northwoods TCG, good stuff. Going back, Rusty, I did want to speak a little bit about maybe the kind of upbringing, because you did speak to that a lot in the past. And I know it was a bit rough. You actually you stayed in a one room house growing up with 4 or 5 people. You slept on the couch until you went to college. I think with the Winnie the Pooh blanket, if I'm not mistaken. Even though you didn't watch Winnie the Pooh, it wasn't really a thing. It just
Yeah.
happened to be the blanket that you had. Speak a little bit about your upbringing and your childhood, because that kind of connects the story to where we were with college.
Yes. I mean, when I was 6, we moved from Henderson, North Carolina, which is more towards the eastern part of the state, kind of northern too, um, to this part of the state, which is more western. We stopped in Hildebrand when we got to Loman's Motel, and
Yep.
well, I mean, we didn't really have. I mean, we didn't have any money. The guy there, his name is Daryl. He actually gave us a
Yeah.
chance. He gave us the first week worth of rent for free until my dad was able to get a job, and my mom eventually got a job as well, and they were able to pay for that stuff. So we stayed in that motel room, which I mean, it was just a one room thing, for about 6 months until we
Mm.
were able to move into the house, which he also had, which was right beside their house, which was near the motel.
Okay.
But it has 2 bedrooms, and it was built in '43. It didn't have a shower, that kind of stuff. It did have forced heat, so it was like oil heat. So like if it got cold, you had to go outside, go downstairs. I mean, it was like a tiny stairway. You had to fumble your way through the dark, open up the furnace, and then hopefully you would put your hand through the soot and find a little red button to turn that heat back on. But yeah, I mean that's where we stayed. Like I stayed in the living room because uh, I got the couch, and it had
Mm-hmm.
there was an air conditioner from my mom and dad's room that was closed off to there. I mean, it was the smallest air conditioner you would ever thought. So it stayed closed. And then the only other air conditioner in the house was in the living room. So that's where I
Yeah.
slept, right there. So that air conditioner could blow right on me. And then my brother, he stayed back in our room, which for the first few years of our life, we had bunk beds. We shared that room. And eventually my brother, when he went overseas, there was a time where we did share that with I guess she'd be my sister-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law, and then her baby son. So I mean, we always had friends coming in and out. Like we never, I mean, like I said, it. Looking back on it, I would think it to be rough for my kids. Like I wouldn't want them to have that. But at the same time, like it was never rough. Like I was always happy. Like my father
Yep.
was always there. He was disabled, but he was
Mm-hmm.
always there. Like his mind was there, and I could come to him anytime I wanted. My mom, she worked hard, super hard. Like she was always working, and like she'd get up in the morning. Every morning she'd pull out her Bible, 6 o'clock. Didn't matter, what was going on. She would be reading her Bible, praying, saying her prayers, and it was just that kind of mentality that I think she helped instill in my life. And
I was
we were
wondering where that
so
came from.
blessed. Like there were times where we didn't have, enough money. Like we didn't know where it was going to come for the rent, and money would just show up in our mailbox, and we knew that it was coming from our local church. They would take care of us at times like that. But until I moved out and you know, I was with my wife and we got married. I really didn't know what it was like to not live paycheck to paycheck. Like I just thought that's what everybody did, and I didn't realize at the time. My parents were pretty heavy into debt too. They actually filed for bankruptcy or Chapter
Mm,
7 or something. I don't know what it is. Basically, it basically says you
right.
don't have anything. They wipe your credit clean, but your
Right.
credit sucks, and you get to keep your car. That's about it. And that's all they had. I
Okay.
mean, they didn't have anything else. It was just a car. So, and really, they were just making payments on a car because they didn't own that either. But us as kids, I mean, we were kind of shielded, from all of that. We just knew that when we come home, our parents were there. If we wanted to have food, we could probably go pull out a can of something that we didn't really want
Yeah.
to eat. But
But you had something.
yeah, we had
Yeah.
something, so you can't complain but so much. Like one of our favorite treats growing up was that instant pudding because it was so cheap.
Yeah.
You could get it for like 49 cents at the grocery store, and we always had milk. So you'd mix it with chilled milk, and then all you had to do it was just the powder and the milk, and you stick it in these little
Yeah.
pudding cups, and then you put it into the refrigerator, and 30 minutes later you've got pudding. And it was a whole lot cheaper than the snack packs. I mean, those things were like a
Yeah.
buck 50 for 4 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good way to get a nice little sugar fix, curb the hunger, and get back out there and start playing again. Yep. Exactly right. And that it's actually a good point because I didn't realize, and we have that on a later point, but I didn't realize where the religion got instilled in you, and it sounds like it was from your mom, and that was just a part of what you saw growing up, and she was always, I guess, part of at least bringing it into the home. I'm not sure. Did you go to church a lot during that time as well, or that was just more in the house?
It was kind of on and off.
Okay.
Um, Really, we started getting more into it steady as I got into my teenage years. It was something that I pushed a little bit harder. Like my dad, he
Mm,
never went. Um, he believed wholeheartedly in Jesus Christ, but he stayed away from church because I don't know. It's like I think he felt judged because of his long hair. His teeth were
mm,
really bad. He was kind of like he was disabled, but he could still move around. He was also very outgoing, and I'm kind of like the opposite. I'm
mm,
more reserved, and so like he didn't connect as much with I think a lot of the people that were around him, but he had a lot of love to give, and he ended
right.
up coming to church for a little while. But the thing was, that wasn't something that he did, but I mean, if you talk to my dad, you're going to hear about Jesus Christ. Like that's just one thing
Okay.
that he was always going to bring up. And then my mom, she loved. I mean, she's always went. She's always got up in the morning, did her devotions, did her prayers, and it
Mm,
was something that we just never did as a family that much. Like when I lived at
mm,
home, but as I got
okay.
into my teenage years, it was something that I felt that I needed to. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it.
Pursue it.
And so I was started going more, and so did my mom. Like even on nights when she wouldn't go, I'd ask her to take me, and because I got pretty involved in the youth group at that time, even though there wasn't a whole lot of people in our youth group. But I felt it was important, if I was going to pursue something, that I was going to do it, all the way.
Right. Which speaks to a lot about who you are as a person as well. I mean, I think I've heard you say that many times. You when you do something, you go all the way and you're all in. So it's part of what makes what you do great, right? Because anytime you give that much dedication to something, you tend to be very good at it. So, yeah, fully understand. All right, well, we'll switch it over a little bit, and we'll come back to some of this because I do have some areas of the personal section I'm going to dive into a little deeper. But we'll maybe switch it over just a little bit for collecting. But just before I do, I missed it earlier. Drew once again dropped the 10 memberships. I really appreciate that, Drew. You don't have to do it, but great appreciation and thank you so much. He mentions here that if you don't have memberships turned on, feel free to do that, everybody, and you might be able to get some of those unclaimed memberships. So appreciate that, Drew. Thanks, man. Um, when we speak about collecting in the hobby, once again, you're somewhere, and I know we'd have no idea of the ranking and who's at the top and best collections, but you definitely have one that's noteworthy and people speak about. Probably one of the areas that is most, I would say, reputable is your uncut sheet collection. Can you start to maybe speak to that a little bit? Is that still kind of your primary pillar in what you collect and have as a prize value, and maybe how you got a couple of those collections along the way?
Oh yeah, I mean, the uncut sheets, man. I think I started collecting those. I want to say 2009, 2010 may have been when I first got one. And the first one I
Okay.
got was a Neo Genesis common uncut sheet. There was a guy on
Okay.
eBay. I believe his username was like Sports Values or something like that. And you could get it for about $20. Like he was selling it for like 25, but if you went to him
Wow.
in a message like, "Hey, if I buy multiple, will you drop down the price?" I remember there was one transaction where I bought 20 of them for $400. And
Wow.
he had so many, like he would run out. He'd say he'd run out, and then you come back a few weeks later, and he'd have more for sale. And like, hey, I thought you said you ran out. At the same time, you didn't want to make him mad because you're like, I want to buy
Right.
those too, you know.
Right.
And he ended
Endless
up like
supply.
he ended up just having so many that I couldn't buy them all because I mean, back then, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of money like pouring into Pokemon. Like if you had something that was worthwhile, I mean, honestly there weren't that many people that were out there buying it at the same time. Like there just weren't items that were worth more than $1,000, much less, I mean, well, $100 really, much less $1,000. I mean, you had like the first edition PSA 10 Charizard, and even then that was a super slow sale to get more than $1,000 out of it. But the uncut sheets, when I remember I got in my first one, I laid it out on the bed in my dorm room, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. Like this is probably the coolest Pokemon thing I've ever seen. Like this is real cards, they're all still connected, and it's huge. And so I decided I wanted to pursue those. So I ended up like
Okay.
looking at all these different places, trying to find uncut sheets. All of Craig's, like that was one that I really liked
Yeah.
because it would
Yeah.
search all of the Craigslist, and every now and then I would stumble across one, and I'd buy it and I'd be real excited, and then I'd go for another one. But like for the Neo Genesis uncommon or common uncut sheets, I had over 50 of those at one point because I ended up
Wow.
selling them, and I put up a listing, and I think I started out at $50, then it went to $100, and it creeped up to $500, and I had over 50 sold by the time I ended the listing, and I
Mm.
didn't realize how much it increased until I sold a few for other people in auction these past this past year, and they both went for over $2,000. So I mean, even though
Wow.
that one, which is considered a really common sheet, really isn't that common if you think about it. Like even if there are two, three, four, 500 of an uncut sheet out there, but it does take a niche collector to have it because when you have one, like it's hard to display. Like it's hard to
Right.
keep the thing and not bend it, and just to store it, just the cost to frame an uncut sheet. I mean, it's up there. Like it costs a lot of money. But that was really like the first thing the uncut sheet that got me into it. But if we're talking about some like specific stories, uh, I remember there was a guy, Crazy Pokemon. I don't know how many of you know who that is. The Pokemon uncut sheet. That's his name. At one point, we kind of struck a deal where if he brought me contacts, and I could make a deal with the guy, then I would give him half of the uncut sheets, as long as I. And I did that knowing that, or I told him that the terms were that I would have to at least get the first pick of the lot because I'd be paying for the whole thing. He'd be getting
Right.
half of it, even though I'm paying for the whole thing. And so I remember he sent me to a guy in Hawaii who had 8 uncut sheets that he wanted to sell. And I remember, I think there were 3 base, 2
Mm.
jungle PCDs, 2 fossil PCD, or those 2 fossil KB toys, 2 jungle PCDs.
Wow.
Then there was, I think the other 4 were base, but 2 were PCDs, and then 2 were the just the regular hollows. And what I mean by PCDs, if anyone who doesn't know, that's pre-constructed decks. So it's talking about the theme deck hollows. So
Yeah.
for like the
Okay.
jungle one, it's just Kangaskhan and Vaporeon. That would be the only 2 hollows on it. For the fossil
Okay.
KB toys, it has all of the fossil hollows, but it's the most common uncut sheet that we know of. And so what ended up happening was I picked, a regular base that had all of the base set hollows on it. And then he picked the other one, and then I
Of
picked a
course.
PCD. So like we just kind of alternated in there. And he ended up getting really mad about it. He was like, "No, I wanted to pick my 4 sheets first, and then you get to pick your sheets." I'm like, "Man,
There's
I
no
can't do
way.
that. I'm paying for the whole thing here." And at that time, the fossil KB toy sheet, I mean, it was like $100 sheet, and had all the fossil hollows on there, but it was pretty common, and not many people were going after it. But I got, the sheets come to me anyways, so I picked mine. I sent him his. He got mad. It is what it is. But
Yeah.
later to come find out, the base set hollow sheet that I had, I didn't find this out till years later when I was going to sell it to somebody. I flipped it over in the video and I noticed that the backsides were upside down. So I've got this
Nice.
full sheet
Errors.
of base set
Sheet of
hollows,
errors.
Charizard, Blastoise, all that, and the backside has upside down Pokeballs.
Pokeballs.
And it was
Yeah.
like, oh man, I can't sell this. I'm sorry, but I want to keep this thing,
Cancel.
And crazy enough, that's not the last time it happened to me. I this past year when I was putting I had acrylics made by Phantom Display
Yeah.
to hold uncut sheets that were sized specifically for it, and I was I've got a Jungle First Edition hollow sheet. I put it in one side, and then I went to put the Unlimited in the other, and
Another error
pulled up
sheet.
and the back sides were upside down. And I was like, I've had this sheet I had had this sheet so long, I'd forgotten. I don't even know where I got that sheet from, the Unlimited Jungle one, because somebody actually brought me one last year sometime. And I was like, yeah, I've never seen one of those in my life before. And then I'm going
You
through
have one.
my acrylics, and I've got one sitting in my stack. And so that's what
For
and I was like,
years.
I probably need to do something about this stuff because, I've got this stack of uncut sheets, and it's like every time I go through it, I've forgotten some of the stuff that I've picked up over the years. But it's kind of nice too, because it's like, oh man, I
It's a
get to
new surprise. Yeah.
rediscover it all over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. For free. You don't have to pay twice, thankfully. That's a great story too, because I love the fact that you're bringing in really a piece of history. And I know you mentioned in some of your past, discussions that you were under the impression originally that these things were all being cut up and like you had to try to like save them before they were all
I
gone.
did.
What was the story behind that? I mean, did you talk to somebody at Pokemon? Like who told you like they were all being cut up?
No, I was being fed that from Crazy Pokemon.
Uh, okay. Well,
If you
I
go
guess the
back through
name.
some of if you can see some of his commentary and Pokegym, it's kind of
Yeah.
wild, the way he talks. He's tried to push, like, he's literally come to me in emails before. This is in the past. Like, I don't know how he is now. Last few conversations I had with him back in 2020, he was fine. But back in the day, he would send me emails and he's like, "What do I have to do to get you to stop buying uncut sheets?" He would tell me this in emails, and he would say, "I am the only one worthy of buying uncut sheets." Like, he would say this as himself to
Wow.
me. He was like, "I am the uncut sheet king. Like, I'm the one who needs to buy this. That's why it's in my name. I have all this stuff. Please," because I would buy them and he would get wind of it. And sometimes he would actually go to these people and he would tell them that
Start
he's the one
harassing
who
them.
needs to buy them. And they'd get so mad at him that they would call me up on the phone. They're like, "I'm
So
tired of
you
dealing with
want?
this guy. Can you just buy this so I can tell him it's gone?" I had one guy call me from New York, and he was like, "Man,
Uh,
I didn't really like your price, but after dealing with this other guy, I'm going to sell it to you, and I'm going to go find this guy." And he actually told me he was going to go punch him in the mouth. Like, he was just going to go find him because he had such a mouth that he was lipping off to him. And it's like, man, what do you do to people? And I don't think he was a bad guy, but I think he rubbed people the wrong way.
right.
And the way he come off like he was better than anyone else that he
Right.
talked to, it just made him mad,
That's yeah.
And but I will say this: Crazy Pokemon, man, he could find some uncut sheets. He's the one he had or claimed to have 10 or 11 disco sheets. They weren't
Ooh.
discos at the time. It was just test print base set. Like, we didn't
Okay.
disco name come out when CGC coined that with the Charizard. I've never actually seen that
Okay.
from anything Pokemon, but he had like 10 or 11 of those. He had Neo Discovery sheets, he had base sheets, fossil sheets, he had all kinds of sheets. Like, he had a lot of really, his collection was crazy. And I'm curious to know if he's still out there, if he has these things, what is he going to do with them? Because for a while, he had money issues. Like, he had some real money issues, and if he had just sold one of these disco sheets at the time, even though it wouldn't have brought anywhere near what it would now, like, he could have really made a difference in his life, from
Right.
what I understand, like how much he needed money. Because, I mean, when I bought a disco sheet publicly through eBay, it was like $1,600. Like, it wasn't that much,
Okay.
but at the
That's not
time,
bad.
that was a crazy sale compared to the prices of everything else in the market. But he had a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm curious, what happened to him. Like, he always said he wanted to sail off into the sunset, with his uncut sheets and be the guy who just gets them all. But, I mean, they come out
Wow.
everywhere. Nobody can buy all these things. And I'm just curious, where he is now. how he's doing. Like I said, the last few conversations I had with the guy, they were really quite cordial. He was, I believe it was
2020.
on, I think it was on E4. He had messaged me,
Okay.
and he was just basically, wishing me good luck, seeing how I was doing, and because we kept in contact. I mean, it's not like we were that sour that we weren't talking with each other.
Right.
But I knew he rubbed people the wrong way, and he did the same thing to me at times, and I'm sure I did to him too.
We gotta let him know if he ever get a chance to talk to him again that hey,
Yeah.
I'm in the market when you want to sell your sheets. I'm the new sheet king, right?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of sheets out there.
We'll see, man. The Phantom displays. I know that you had those made custom. I think you were actually the first person to get it, right? So they had to ship those over. It cost quite a lot. It was like $4,000 to have it shipped via sea. Is that right?
Yeah, that was like the cheap way.
Yeah, right. Because it was like $8,000 over air, right? So it was,
Something like that. It's
yeah.
Save a lot of money. 6 weeks of delayed gratification.
Did you get a chance to really display all of your sheets, or you just kind of hand pick a few?
No, I think I've got 10 acrylics.
Okay.
So, and really, I can only display the ones that were that size. I went with the most common size, which was like I think the 10 by 11, or I think it's the 10 cards by 11 cards. And so the ones that are bigger can't go in there. The ones that are smaller, they can. They've got a little bit of room. I did end up putting my Japanese full uncut sheet, like the base set hollow sheet, in one, even though it's smaller. It's not the 4x4, but it's the 4 sections of 4x4. So it's really 8x8.
Okay. You just kind of centered it in the middle, and that way it looks decently.
Best I could. I didn't want it to slide down too fast and like put a dent in it or nothing. So, but
we don't need another dent story for one of your sheets like the one from your wife.
Oh yeah, I've dented plenty myself too, though.
Have you? No, but that just it's a heartbreaking. I mean, I don't need to get too much into detail, but how do you store the ones you don't have in an acrylic case? I would just be afraid to really just damage those easily.
So I've got like those. There's some shelves similar to. It's not them. Like this is a U-line metal shelf, but I've got something. It's like little black shelving units that you could buy from Walmart. It's like $50 or whatever. But I put cardboard on top of that, and then each one of the sheets they're put inside of a giant top loader. You can get those 30 by 40 top loaders off of Cardboard Gold. You used to be able to get them. It was like 10. You could get a bundle of 10 for like $60 or something like that. So I mean, and they're big because, like, if you go to Michael's or any art place, usually the biggest frame they have is like a 27 by 40 or something like that, which is just not quite big enough.
Too short.
And so, but the 30 by 40 uncut sheet top loader is, I think that's what they call it. It's just like a giant top loader. It protects it from both sides. It doesn't freestand. It's really flexible, but you can put the sheet in there and it's going to protect the surface. And I used to seal them up with tape over the top so nothing would get in there either.
Okay. I didn't realize they sold top loaders to that size from Cardboard Gold. I mean, I ordered products from them for other things, but I never was in the market for a uncut sheet top loader. A little bit bigger than I'm used to buying, that's for sure. All right, man. That sounds good. So keeping on the collecting side, I know you had a goal. It's in the name, right? TCA, the Charizard Authority. You were trying to go for the registry. It kind of sounded, as I listened to things over the years, you weren't as stringent on that goal as you once were. What is your perspective on that? Are you just kind of collecting what you enjoy now, or are you actually still trying to be the best when it comes to the registry and Charizards?
So I was, and when I completed it and I got that gold award or whatever from PSA, which was really cool. After that, they started adding really obscure things that, like, there's no way for me to be able to keep up with it because it's not complete. The stuff that gets added to it from the past is just added manually as people put it in there and as they approve it. So if I had a rock solid list that I could pursue and that they would grade these things, sure, maybe. But there's just so many items that they still never have even graded that they may grade new as they recognize a lot of things. Like the first one that did it for me is the Canadian Game Board Charizard card. I mean, it's like this big or whatever. It's just like a little playing piece card that goes inside
Okay.
of a game board, and
You were like, that's
it's
it.
from like 2005, based out of Canada. And so it took me a while I ended up buying like 50 of those game boards, trying to get all the Charizards out of it so I could get a 10, because the game boards, I could get the whole box collection for like $20, and then I'd pay like $50 shipping.
Mm,
I mean, it was kind of crazy. And I got to thinking about it, like, this is just nuts. Like,
that's
there are all
funny.
these different stickers, and there's things that BGS will grade or CGC will grade, but PSA wouldn't. And so I would collect them from BGS or CGC, and then PSA would start recognizing them. And then it would take a year to get it added in. And I believe it wasn't this past year, but the year before, they slid in like 50 items that were just super obscure right before the deadline. And I'm like,
That's
like, how am I
cheating.
supposed to possibly get this stuff? Like, and I've had stuff on there that's been sitting waiting approval since like October the prior year, and all this
Crazy.
stuff slides in
Oh
April
man.
right before the deadline. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to pursue this. I'm not going to drive myself crazy trying to figure out what's going to be on the list when I don't even know what exists. Like, they won't even
Yeah.
recognize the difference between a red and a green card ass.
Tops.
I mean, an obvious variation difference. And when I tried to get them to recognize the different variants for tops, like the Top Series 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or Top Series 1, but the print 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, where there's
Right.
a logo that's an obvious different color, and there's obviously different textures to the patterns of the holofoil. They said that their system couldn't handle it. That was basically what it was. Like, it was just too hard for them to do. And I'm like, come
I
on,
love
like,
that.
I get it. It's a lot of cards, but you have the entire set list, and it every single card will repeat. It just, now it's second print, now
Right.
it's third print, or call it red logo, green logo, black logo. That's even, for me, that'd be
Something.
better than first, second, third, fourth, because I can't ever remember that. I know blue is first, I think black is second, maybe red is third. I don't know, but if you put the
Mm,
color on there, I know exactly what it is. And I don't know. It was just those things that kind of, I was like, I'm tired of driving myself crazy. So I'm going to just go for the cards that I really want, in Charizard,
okay.
like for Charizard specifically. And if it comes convenient to me and I can add it to my collection in the highest grade possible, I'm going to do that. And really, my focus when I got into doing this, anyways, was trying to get one of every English Charizard in a
Right.
PSA 10 that come out of like a booster pack or was an official card release. And so all this
Okay.
extra sticker stuff, the Japanese Bandais, things that I really
Right.
didn't know what they were. That was just kind of something additional that I pursued once I completed the English side. But then they started expanding the English side too, and it just got really difficult. Like, I don't know. Sometimes the names that they put on the cards don't even make sense. Like, I it can go in the Charizard registry if it has Charizard in the name, but then you have cards that are nothing but Charizard, but it's like a cameo, and the card's name is actually something else. And like,
Mm,
there was one Japanese card, I can't. They basically called it A08 or something. I don't know, but there was like 8 different
mm,
versions of the card, but it wasn't actually a Charizard card, even though the Charizard was the entire card. It was some other set release name for it. So it, it was just so difficult to figure out
too
how,
much.
what should qualify, that I don't think that I could ever get a concrete list of what I'd be able to pursue. So I'm going to just stick to like the cards that
English.
I really enjoy having in my personal collection, because all that other stuff, if we're all being honest, like, it's probably a terrible it's going to have terrible resale value compared to what I paid for it. Like, I know that I'm
Right.
not getting 12 grand back for that Cosmos Legendary Collection Charizard. Maybe one day, it would take
Hold it. Hold
none
it.
more being added to the set registry, and a bunch of collectors who were as enthusiastic about me wanting that card 10 years from now for me to ever to make my money back on something like that.
Well, thinking about that same perspective, do you think now that you've redefined that goal, will you go back and just the things that maybe are a little bit more liquid, would you now sell the things that you don't really want? Start
I
listing
have
those slowly?
considered it. I
Yeah.
have considered it. Like, I've still got a box where I've got all the Charizards I have in like Cantonese and French and all these other obscure languages, because I had pursued this where at one point I wanted to have like a master Excel list of every Charizard, and it had a link, in each language of that specific card, to where it linked to a
Mm,
registry. Ideally, it would have been PSA at the time when I was doing that. But most of the cards that I put in there that weren't English, they actually didn't have like a placeholder. So I would have BGS or CGC would grade it, but I'd have to get them the information for it because they had just started up. And man, it was just so much to keep up with. Like it sucked the fun out of it. So eventually I may, but I think with those kind of items, I'm gonna have to find the right buyer. I don't want to just liquidate everything, especially with the amount of time and effort that I've put into it. For now, I could just let it sit and let it be.
Yeah.
And if somebody requests, a specific card, I'll be like, hey, you know what? I might have that. What's your offer? And then, we kind of look at the market. And I'm like, all right, if that right offer comes along, maybe I'll just go ahead and move it because I know that's going to be a better idea than holding on to it. And then my kid liquidating it, when I jump out of a plane and, now they don't know what to do with all these cards because daddy was an idiot.
Because daddy has all this stuff with Pokemon. Let's just get rid of it for $10. Just come take it. Just come take it. Do you keep, thinking about that in the future? Do you keep track of what you paid for things so you kind of make sure you're not, underselling yourself? And do you have that level of record keeping for your personal?
Only what I can remember.
Okay, it's
I
all
try
here?
not to look at that. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, there's some things I have to keep track of, but a lot of the cards like that, no. I could look it up at almost everything I keep in my Gmail. I was sending a screenshot to somebody. I can't remember what it was about, but it was of my Gmail, and my Pokemon folder is on like the left side, and it tells you how many emails you have unread. And it was at 99,900 and something. Like it was almost 100,000 unread emails in my Pokemon folder. Now, granted, most of those are just going to be sales from eBay because you get an email every time you make a sale. But I keep track of all that. So I like Gmail for that function where I can go through and I can search a keyword that I remember that relates to something, and I can kind of whittle it down by putting in more keywords if I need to, just to be able to find it and go back through all of the sales that I've ever had.
Make sure you pay for that Gmail premium plan because I think they were going to start deleting emails. So for the free version. So.
Right now, I've got 200 gigabytes. I paid $2.99 a month.
Money well spent. Money well spent. We got one from R&D here. He said his son wants to know if you have the Rainbow Charizard in 10. I think there's a couple.
Yes.
But
I don't know if I have all of them, but yeah, I've got most of them. In fact, I've got one that will be going into that 24-hour auction. I had if you guys remember the Reshiram and Charizard GX from our Broken Bonds, it's got a rainbow rare. And there's actually a version with a pink dot on the backside. And I had pulled 2 of them, and I graded both of them in a 10. So I had kept both of them just in case if somebody wanted to buy one, they'd be like, I could show them that it was a repeated error because I know that there are more of them out there, but I kept 2 of them. But I'm going to auction off one. So it'll be at a penny for 24 hours. Might not do that great.
There you go, Zach. Go ahead and try to snag that one on his eBay there. You might get it for a good deal. Get it for Ryder. Having been in the hobby as long as you have, Rusty, and seeing so many cards, because I know you used to do singles, and now you've kind of changed your business model a lot, but you used to rip through those, much like Nick, old school Pokemon. Is there things that are still exciting you about Pokemon today? I mean, are you still looking at some of these new packs and new sets coming out, and are you thrilled about anything you see, or you're still always looking in the past to find that thrill?
I mean, I like a little bit of both. I mean, it was. I tell you, I opened up a lot of base hit boxes this past year, so I get most excited when I see an error or something that hasn't been pulled yet. Like I've never pulled an error word turtle. I don't know if anybody has. Like I think that would be so cool to do. A the Beedrill error. I mean, that'd be kind of cool to see if it actually comes from a theme deck or if it does come from a pack. But yeah, from the new stuff, I still get excited over some of the stuff, like with the new Wild Forces or whatever it is.
Yep.
I know there's names for those for the long neck, but it's a Raikou to me. That is a Raikou.
Right.
The
Exactly.
the T Rex
Giraffe
has the
raccoon.
Suicune, and then you've got Entei. I mean, that's what I'm calling those cards until I fully have it, down whatever
I'm
their
right
new
there with
name
you.
is. But
Yeah.
that's what they look
Yeah.
like to me. And making him have a long neck, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I think that's better than the hat
Dinosaur.
thing that they had going on with like the V Stars or
Thank you.
whatever it was with the crystal. Like if they'd made him like an actual crystal Pokemon, maybe I would have liked that a little bit better than throwing a hat on top of his head.
Yeah, I fully agree. I'd rather go dinosaur than crystal hat any day of the week. That's for sure. But I'm also with you on, I don't call what is it, Roaring Moon. I call it Salamence. Like it's a Salamence for
Yes, that
me.
is a Salamence.
Exactly. Let's not start changing the names. We can change the way it looks. Let's leave the names the same. But those excite you, but you don't really collect them, right? I mean, you think it's cool, you like the artwork, but then that's really where it stops for you. Or do you actually say, hey, maybe I want a master set 151, for example?
I thought about it, but at the same time, like I have so many things that I already collect. I don't want to make new goals without knowing for sure that I want to do it because I got a full PSA 10 Hidden Fates Shiny Vault set, and then
Mm.
I ended up selling it off this past year because I was like, this set doesn't really appeal to me as much as I thought it would. There are
Right.
certain things that I do that I have got set back. Like I've got the Pikachu EX, I've got that in pristine, but from the World Championships 2023, but it's not the whole deck box. I'm just collecting that one
Okay.
card, the special delivery Pikachu's or the Charizard promos. Like
Right.
I've got those specific cards that I'm collecting and I'm setting back because I think they're nice, but I try to make sure that anything that I'm setting back from my personal collection that it also makes sense financially too. Because if I have a
Right.
lot of money tied up into it, then I want to know that it's going to appreciate. And it's not just sitting there gathering dust in a box because I don't. I, I'm not going to grab just one of them. I'm probably going to grab 10 or I'm going to grab 50 or 100 or maybe even more. So if I really like something like that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense usually for me to grab one-offs. Now there are some cards that I do one-offs. Like I've got a box in there that's got it's like an Aerodactyl from what is it, Astral Radiance. I can't remember if it was that one or another set. It's the
Yeah, the one flying
alternate
through the
artwork.
air. Yeah,
Like I thought that was a really neat artwork, but the reason I stuck that
it's
one
Lost
back is
Origin.
because it ended up being like a really cheap pickup for me, and I was like, you know what, I'll just keep this, and I
Yeah.
stuck it in a box, and I do that with random cards, or if there's certain cards in Yu-Gi-Oh like that, there's certain cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that appeal more to me because I played the game longer, and I never
Mm.
like played in tournaments, but I played at school, I played during lunchtime, I played at leagues, and I really enjoyed making decks in Yu-Gi-Oh with those first 6 sets. So there's certain cards that really appeal to me that don't have a lot of value. And so like I've got a crab turtle, pristine condition. So
Mm.
most of you probably have no idea what that is, but it's just like
Okay.
it's like a common card from a Yu-Gi-Oh set that's not worth a whole lot of money. But I've got one of those in my collection because it takes me back to a time when I remember being at my grandfather's house playing with a neighbor that I'd met, completely out of town, and we were just dueling Yu-Gi-Oh. We
Playing
were
Yu-Gi-Oh.
doing the best we
Yeah.
could. So, but I'm not going to have 50 of Crab Turtle because there's probably not even 50 in the world that have been graded because it's not that popular of a card. And if I ever go to resell it, I've got to find one person if I have one. There ain't no way I'm going to find 50
Right.
people who are willing to buy that.
Walrus this crab turtle, or was it ritual monster?
Yes, it
Monster.
was a ritual monster.
Okay.
Yes, one of the
All right.
originals. I've got
Sounds
the
like
turtle art
he
that goes
knows.
with it too.
We don't have to dive too deep, but I'm curious. Since you did do both, is it true that the deck, the strategy, the game is much more complex and fun in Yu-Gi-Oh? I've heard it. I play Pokemon, but I've never played Yu-Gi-Oh. Is that also your perspective? Because I know you play both.
Yeah, even when it was simple Yu-Gi-Oh, when you
Mm-hmm.
could actually try to just use attack monsters and beat them. Um, yeah, it was much more complicated, but I like that. And back when Yu-Gi-Oh was, in the very beginning, it was definitely way more complicated than Pokemon. But you've got trap cards,
Okay.
you got cards that you could play on your opponent's turn. So it just
Okay.
throws a whole other wrench
Yeah,
in there when
Vowels.
you do that kind of stuff, and you've got your side decks and different things. I believe now it's so complicated that I wouldn't even want to attempt to learn Yu-Gi-Oh because they've got all the. I've got something in my mind where this is the way Yu-Gi-Oh should be. Like, I remember how it was. That's what I like. I feel like if I tried to do it now, I would just get mad because it's not. It's completely different. I've got
Too
something
far.
romantic, romanticized with the game from back.
Those things are often better left in your memory. My wife often romanticizes about the way a certain meal tastes from a restaurant, and we get it, and it's never the
It's like,
same. I said, do you
oh man,
really want it, or do you just want to remember how it was, and we can go get something else that you know
it was
you
just, it
like?
was just the waiter.
Yeah, exactly.
They took it down wrong, wrong order.
um, when we ever get a chance to connect, Rusty, we'll definitely have to play at least one game of Pokemon, though. So I'll have a couple of meta decks here, and we'll try to see if we can get you through a few games, and
All
I
right.
think you'll enjoy it, man. You'll enjoy it. You got a buyer. Oop, I missed it. We got a buyer here for your crab turtle. He's just a low baller, so feel free to reach out to Walrus. I
I've
did
only,
see
I've only
Rob in
got
here
one
as
right
well.
now.
You only got one. Well, he'll lowball the one. I'm sure he'll definitely try to get it from you. I think I saw Rob in here as well. Good to see you, Rob from Red and Blue. Thanks for stopping by, man. It's always good to see you, my friend. Um, one of the things I heard you say a while back, Rusty, and again, I've looked at so much, I don't remember exactly the time frame, so forgive me if I'm jumping around chronologically here. But you mentioned looking back in 2012, and like a base set box was like $1,000, and you looked at that at the present, and this was in the past few years or so. You said, why didn't we just snap all those up? Like it seems so backwards thinking, because at the time you thought this was way too expensive. And now you look at that and say, why? Do you feel, if you look at the present time, are we making those same types of thought processes about the current sets that are coming out in Scarlet and Violet? Or do you think something fundamentally is different and those are not necessarily repeatable in the present?
I mean, it's always possibly repeatable. I mean, we've seen it with many of the almost every set that's been released. With given enough time, we've seen the increase price in boxes, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I mean,
Right.
Pokemon's printing at
A lot.
unprecedented levels right now,
Yeah.
and you have a lot of people who are looking to the past, much more so now than back then.
Hmm.
If everybody knew, then it wouldn't have happened. Like if everybody thought that, if everybody knew that these boxes were going to go, to the moon from where they were. I mean, they were at MetaZoo prices at one point in 2002.
Hmm.
$20 boxes, and they were really moving. So you probably could have made some deals and got them even lower than that. But if everybody knew that they were going to go to $10,000 plus, then it wouldn't have happened. Like
Right.
I think that I'm set. Like if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm setting back 40 or 50 cases or so on every set that I can. My biggest issue is space.
Yeah.
But if say Scarlet and Violet doubles to $200 a box and I can get $1,200 for a case, I'm going to be
Sell
moving
it.
through those cases because how long will it take for it to double again? And who's to say Pokemon won't just
Right.
reprint stuff? I mean, I know Evolutions was coming out for 4+ years, right? And then you had the Sun and Moon Elite Trainers that got reprinted over 5 years afterwards. I'm pretty sure it was 5 years because when those Elite Trainers reprinted, I want to say it was a year and a half ago or something like that. Gosh,
Hmm.
I can't remember exactly when it happened, but when the Sun and Moon base set Elite Trainers reprinted, like they took the cake for the longest a set had been out. If you were saying that those were available from the market, but you could buy those through distribution. I mean that's a long time. I mean Fates Collide. I mean you could buy that from my distributor up until these past few months. Like I was still
Hmm.
able to get
Wow.
the pre-release kits where you got 8 deck kits or whatever it is, and then you get one of these that Fates Collide box right there. And so,
Yeah.
I can't buy them anymore, but it wouldn't surprise me if they come out with more of them.
Hmm.
And so I think with a lot of the product like base set, I mean, base set is always going to appeal to old collectors. It's going to appeal
Right.
to new collectors too that are looking back once they get to that price point where they're thinking about how much money they could spend. But base set, I mean, guys, I mean, we're still seeing cases just come out of nowhere. I mean, green wings, blue wings. I mean, it seems like there's a never-ending supply of these things that just continue to funnel into the market. and they continue to get open. Maybe one day they will actually run out, but we don't know when that's going to be. If you're looking at sets today, how much more is being printed of those sets?
Yeah.
How much more is
Versus
being
those.
set back? And how many more cards are out there that are also going to keep the value of those boxes down? I mean, yeah, I get that there are pulls in them that people that are harder to get, but at the same time, does it matter? Like, do people actually want it? How long is it going to take for those cards to
Mm.
be at the point where it makes sense to open the box, or people get excited to open those packs because they think that they can pull $100 card? I mean, you
Right.
could get base set hollows 15 years after the set released for under $1. I mean, you could just go buy them in bulk from Troll and Toad. You go buy as many as you wanted. And you could get that for almost all the hollows except for the three starters. But even then, like when I first started out, I was buying Charizards for $5 and I was selling them for 10. That was the best margin card, the most liquid you could get at the time. I mean, it was just one of those things where you could always find Charizards. And if you could get somebody to sell them to you in mass, I mean, you could get them down to about $5 and then you could turn them around for $10. It wasn't even worth
Mm.
it to grade Charizard.
Hmm. Times have changed, man. Times have changed. That same card is going for much more than 5. Much more than 5. Yeah, I mean, he kind of mentioned it. Base set was overprinted, but and I we'll never know. And this is just my opinion, and Rusty maybe can chime in, but we'll never know actually what the comparison is of to his point of what they're printing now for the latest Scarlet and Violet Temporal Forces, for example, versus base set. Like, is it 10 times more? 100 times more? I have no idea. No idea. Do you have we'll jump around a little bit here on this one just to kind of dig a little deeper on that. Do you have those kind of conversations with your distributors? And do you have one or multiple, or uh, how many do you actually work with?
Right now, I've got two, but I really only
Okay.
work with one. I usually just go with whoever's giving me the best price, and it's almost
Okay.
always them. But
Okay.
I have had conversations with them about a lot of these things. And my main rep, he actually retired a little over a year ago, maybe
Hmm.
longer. Old school
Okay.
Pokemon's in there. He probably knows when Jacob retired. But I remember the very first deal that I had with Matt Owls. Jacob, he actually drove to my house. He drove to my
Hmm.
house where my mom and dad were, and he met up with me. They hand delivered it, but we just sat there and we just talked in person
Hmm.
about
Wow.
different things. And he was trying to sell me base set 2 boxes for $350. So that wasn't at that time. It was too much. Like I didn't want to buy it. This was back in I want to say 2014, 2013
Okay.
maybe. It wasn't
Okay.
it wasn't too far back, but I remember, I mean, you could get, a lot of this stuff, even from distribution for a while because they set that stuff back. They know what's
Yeah.
hot by how much people are
Yeah.
ordering, and they'll set some of it back and they'll let it trickle out, and they can help with their margins for all that crap that they have to order that nobody wants
Exactly.
to take that they have to sit on. I remember when I first started with Evo with Troll and Toad back in 2018. I
Hmm.
want to say it was 2018 because
Okay.
it was right before I was leaving the shop. Uh, and I drove up there, and Matt Allis is in the same place. So I was talking. I was actually got a tour. Everything that they had, and it was crazy looking at the stuff that they had on shelves. Like, I'll take that case of Mythical Collection. I'll take all of those. I'll take all of those.
Wow.
Can you work a deal on this stuff? And at the time, he had 2 pallets sitting there. I mean, it wasn't like a pallet delivery where it's only like 300 boxes. I mean, it was like
Right.
above my head. This stuff was
Eight
stacked.
eight
I
feet.
mean, it was full pallets wide. I mean, it was literally it's probably 1,000 cases, on each one of these pallets sitting there. And he was like, yeah, we didn't want it, but we wanted to get the new set. But to get the new set, they forced us to take these 2 pallets of Unbroken Bonds. And,
Oh
at
wow.
the time, nobody wanted it. I mean, it was just like dirt cheap. Nobody wanted to buy these. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to take any of those, but, maybe we can add some in, trickle them into my orders here and there. And, eventually, I mean, we see where Unbroken Bonds went. So
Yeah.
you just never know where a set can go like that. I mean, Evolutions was, I mean, it was just in the dumps for the longest time. And, you could even send messages to your distributor when they were out of Evolutions and be like, hey, I'd like to order more of this. Can you get the order directly from Pokemon for us? So then they would put it into Pokemon, and then you'd get your order about 2 weeks later. But you
Hmm.
could make pretty good money with evolutions like that, because even though all the distributors were saying that they were out, if you had a close enough relationship with your with who you were working with that distribution, they could call it Pokemon, and they still had backlogs of that weren't on their website and that you couldn't get from distribution. So people were already
Right.
panicking, the prices were going up, but you could go ahead and get those products in. I did that
Hmm.
with a lot of the sleeved blister cases, and man,
Yeah.
you could immediately flip those things for like 3 times the MSRP.
Did you have to buy a certain amount to kind of make that made as you or pay as you go kind of order?
I would usually order 10 cases of whatever. Like that was just kind of like my
Okay.
standard order, but for the most part, no. And the reason that was in place was because I remember when I had my shop, GTS approached me on Facebook and they were like, "Hey, we'd like to get your business." Back then, that's how, I mean, nobody had
Okay.
distributors because it was just easy enough to get the stuff on the regular market, but distributors would actually seek you out. And he reached out to me on Facebook and was like, "Hey, could we sell you boxes? You know, here are our prices. They're like $80 a box." And I was like, "No, that's too expensive. I already got a distributor who will ship them to me at 76.50 at the time."
Hmm.
Or no, 76 flat, and it was but I had to buy at least one case, and it was like, "Well, if you buy from us, we'll match that price, and it doesn't matter how many boxes you buy. You can just buy one box and we'll ship it to you for that price."
Hmm.
So GTS and Mad Owls, they were both shipping to me, yeah, at the same time. But I could, if I just needed one box to replace in my shop, I could call up my guy at GTS, and they would ship it to me landed for $76. And it was like, it was super easy. I mean, they were really pushing that stuff because
Hmm.
nobody, I mean, you could get as much
Nobody
as you
wanted.
wanted from Pokemon. Like if you wanted to buy a product, as long as you just had somebody to call up, they would sell it to you.
Hmm. Ti- Very different times now.
Yeah, wish I had those prices now.
Yeah. Very, very different.
But you could
Uh,
you could
uh,
you could pin them against each other too. Like all these
mhm.
different distributors, they would, like if you told one you had this price, the other guy, they'd be like, "All right, well we'll actually match it, and then we'll come down and we'll give you some extra perks. We'll send you, like I got a Yu-Gi-Oh refrigerator over here on my left side that I got from
Oh, that's
GTS. Like
cool.
they were like, we'll just throw this Yu-Gi-Oh refrigerator in for free. Just make sure you don't tell anybody that you paid for it."
Nice little perks. It's always nice to get some of that. But of course, increase your allocations at a good price. Never hurts. Never hurts. We'll throw one out of left field here because I'm curious as well. Ernie says, Rusty, you're a coach for Pokemon Pickup Game. Who do you got on your team and why?
Hmm. Is this like a, if we're saying that this game is for like where we're actually going to play against each other?
Mm.
Man, I'm gonna have to think on who's actually playing. You mentioned some meta decks, so maybe Pokemon Wonder would be somebody I'd be picking up on, because most of the people that I run with in the Pokemon Circle don't actually play the game. But like
Mm.
I think I could hold my own against most people that are classic card collectors, I guess you could say, like myself. But I would probably get destroyed by somebody who knows the current meta, because I haven't played in several years now, and I
Mm.
wouldn't have any idea like what's making up like the majority of decks. That's like the staples. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with
it's
the person who slipped in there that he has some meta decks.
perfect. We'll throw in Azul in there as well. Probably a few others that are currently rocking it right now in the trading card game. Saw some new winners this year, but yeah, I try to keep up with a little bit of that. But it's a whole nother world. Man, Pokemon hobby is so big. You could
Yeah,
just
Danny
suck your
Phantom, he
entire
probably
life
does some
away.
of that too, right?
I'm sorry.
Danny Phantom, he probably does some of that too. So I might pick him. He'd be on the team.
Yeah,
I'd go
yeah,
for.
we'll get Danny on there.
I think he's
Yeah.
he's probably got a good shot at knowing what's going on.
Yeah, Danny actually was, coaching the whole team, and they had a whole basically a business around it. So definitely has a deep touch with it. He's always also selling, at the. He doesn't go to Collecticons, but he does all of the regional events. So he's always selling there. So he's always connected with the players. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
Danny would be
Mason,
a good one to have
he's
on the
got a
team.
Mason's got a card shop, so
Mm,
he's probably got a
mm,
good idea of what
mm.
people are wanting for their decks. I'm gonna go with him too.
All right, that's a solid team right there. I like it. Mason, Dan, and me, and then you, Rusty. We'll do it. We'll do it. We'll take them all down. We got one also here before we continue from Rob. Rusty, for how much product seems to be available, do you find sealed product is overpriced compared to PSA 10 prices for early WotC?
So to me, yeah, I mean, it definitely is. But, you know, market doesn't really care, right?
Mm-mm.
People want what they want. I mean, that's why when a new set comes out, I mean, it sells like wildfire that first month. Like you're going to move a lot of product that release week, the first week, the second week, and you see
Mm.
those diminishing returns. It just slowly tapers off. You know, the popularity, it fades. So to me, yeah, I think it is because I like the old stuff. I see how much more rare or how much more scarce it is, you know, to find a PSA 10 Koga's B drill from Gym Challenge. But
Mm.
how many people actually want that, you know, compared to a booster box of the newest set? You're going to have, you know, there's just so much more volume for the new stuff.
Right.
I think that's why, you know, those prices are the way they are. It's just kind of the market demand. It's just so much higher for that new stuff compared to the old product. You've got time on your hands. It's already been released, you know, all this stuff. You just have to wait for somebody to sell it at the wrong time. And you can pick it up.
Yeah. Some good prices happen on auctions every now and then as well. He meant basketball. So I guess Pokemon people in the YouTube space or in Pokemon space, but playing basketball. So that changes your answer probably entirely.
All right. So if we went with basketball and I was picking up people, I'll be honest with you.
John probably right.
I'm gonna get Radar because you know he played for
Yeah.
Michigan State. I played a little. We didn't get to really play that much here, but I definitely need a shooter to feed. I'm gonna take Jake from Pokenomics too. You know,
I heard it was a good shot.
he uh he had some hustle in him, and I like hustle. I really like it when people hustle. Now I know there's a bunch of other people who say they play some basketball. Like I heard that Robo guy, he plays basketball, but I've never seen him play.
Mm.
Dan, I don't know. He's tall, but I can't tell if he's going to hustle up
Yeah.
and down the court with me because I'm all about the speed, just getting the rebounds, going but fast as possible. There's a
I
bunch of
think
people
Dan's
that play some
consistent.
basketball.
I don't know if he's consistently fast though.
I heard that guy. Who is it? Oak. He's like 6'5" or something, right? But at the
Yep.
same time,
Yep.
he doesn't. I don't know if he's a quick mover
I don't
either.
know.
He
Yeah,
said
I might pull in retro for you. Retrospects, I think plays
he
basketball.
good.
So yeah, I heard he was got some hoops on him. Oh, and basic plays a little bit. There was a funny little screenshot he
He played
shared
some
in our
ball.
yeah, yeah. He was dunking somewhere, and somebody says he was dunking like on the kid's goal.
Hey, you know what? It it pays off to dunk on a little kid's goal because you know you just get that motion down. If you've never
Yeah.
dunked before, it's kind of awkward. It's like even if you can dunk a lot, like dunk a lot with your right hand, then go try to dunk with your left hand. That's about how most people dunk
Mm,
with their dominant hand because they don't know how to take that ball into the step, bring it up, and then
right.
you know
Cup it.
put it
Yeah.
away. I mean,
Yeah.
there were a lot of tall people that I had seen when we went to it was a Leonhardt pop up shop event, like
Mm,
Swole Poke. I mean, you know, he definitely looks like he's got the athletic build, but I don't know if he's good at basketball because basketball you got to be kind of coordinated. If you get out
yeah.
there, there's really muscular dudes that are kind of goofy and they're not good with
Right.
their hand eye coordination and moving.
Agility. Yeah.
Like I know Cool Trainer Ryan, he talks about being really coordinated with like sports and stuff. So maybe I'll
Yeah.
take him
Maybe.
on
Yeah.
the ball team. Pat Flynn, I think he's talked about basketball before. I bet he could be a good shooting
Yeah.
guard or a good point guard, get up and down the
Yeah.
court. He was talking about he had a vert of like 40 some inches or something when he went through that program, which is just nuts. Like
Wow.
like I've got a vert of about 30 inches and I beat out most people. And you talking about 40 inches, like you're talking about like getting into the NBA. Like Michael Jordan's vert was like 47 inches or something like that. So I mean,
I'm
that's
pulling
pretty
like a
crazy.
Mugsby Bowes there or something like that, right? So.
Yeah, he could dunk. He was 5'3". It was nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're a NC man, so you get that reference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. That was a good team. I like that. It was good. Yeah. I could definitely see that one pulling some fire in the shots.
Dan would be a slow
Uh,
shack.
yeah. Yeah, Dan. Yeah, definitely. He'd be a good blocker though. He'd be a good blocker. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't see him running up and down the court. He'll just kind of wait for you halfway.
Well, he
And
did
see,
say he played all the sports in high school, so maybe we could
yeah,
get him
get him
running up and
trained.
down there.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
he's got if he's got good footwork, we can work with it.
All right,
That's a big
all right,
body.
Dan. We got to get you trained up, Dan. Start working on it, buddy. All right, my friend. So we'll keep it rolling. One of the things I want to touch on right before we jump on to some of the business perspective was I was really intrigued on how you've involved your family over the years, and it kind of touches a little bit on business as well because they're not really collectors other than your kids having a binder of things you probably force upon them, and some packs that they open happily, but then lose interest probably 5 minutes afterwards. But you definitely included the family a great deal from,
Yeah.
open up 50 cases sitting there with, well, I think mom was scanning code cards, dad was ripping packs, you were sorting, kids were picking up trash. I mean, you just had a whole assembly line moving through there. But you've also included your wife in a more serious note on shipping almost daily for a long time.
Mhm.
Your mom helps out on a regular basis as well. Were these decisions for you to really bring your family in and kind of keep that bond with what you're doing in the business? Or is it because you really just needed help and you needed to pull them in? What was your perspective on bringing the family into the business like that?
The decision was kind of just made on a case by case basis. With my wife, she was involved pretty heavily with the business up
Mm,
until this year. Um, I would say after we had our first child, that's when she decided to leave her job so that
mhm,
she could be home more with Emma. But she was always doing shipping in the morning. I had her sorting things. Like she was pretty much working for me, doing really anything that I had a need for extra to be done. Like she'd help break down product, and it was that way for years.
mm,
Even when we had the
okay.
shop open, the physical shop, like she'd come there and she'd help out behind the counter. She would help rip stuff, and yeah, she did shipping every morning, just about anytime. Um, and I mean, she was good at shipping. Like I could put any sort of package on top of the label, and she'd know exactly how to package it well, and like she'd do it fast. Like because to
Yeah.
her, as soon as she got it done, like she could move on to something else. She could either help with, if we had to break down a bunch of crap, like if we had a lot of tins or collection boxes or something like that, she'd help out with that, and she'd move on. Then she'd be done. If I ran out of stuff to give her, like she was done. But she was really good at it. She was efficient. She could move through it, and the only reason she doesn't do that now is just because she's got herself a job full time for the first time since 2014 or early 2015. And with my mom, she works for me a lot now. She's ever since she's moved in, she's kind of started in on the shit. Like she started slow with doing some of the shipping stuff, but now she does the shipping in the morning. I have to give
Okay.
her like specific box size
Right.
box packages for her to do, so she can just do the same thing over and over again. But thankfully with PSA graded cards, it's almost always one purchase, or
Simple.
um,
Yeah.
like they might buy two PSA graded cards. There's not much difference there, but she'll take care of that. She'll take stuff to the post office, which saves me a lot of time. If I have to go to UPS, she'll drive it out there, and so that's a real help. So really, anytime I've had a need for something, and been able to pay somebody in my family, that's been really helpful. My dad, when he was alive, he used to do a lot of sorting. Like I would just, I'd take a big 5-row box of something and I take it to him like, hey, could you sort this? I need it alphabetized, or I need these opened, or I need these WB promos wiggled to the side so you can see which card is in there. Then I want you to put them inside of a, a, a semi-rigid so that I can still see it, but it's nice and secure. He was really good at doing those kind of things. Like I could just give him instructions, he would do it, and I didn't have to worry about it. My
Mm,
mom requires a lot more instruction and going over a few times, just because. But once she gets something, like she's
she's
got it,
on it.
and she's a
Yeah.
very, very steady worker. With my kids, whenever I can, I'll get them to working in here. They're actually going to be doing a little bit more work this year because they've officially.
Good.
There's like a child labor thing that I can do where
Yeah.
I can pay them, for work as long as they're actually doing work, and I don't have to pay
Right.
taxes on it. I didn't realize that. So there's a limit that I can do for it, but I'm just paying it. I'm putting it in their savings account. So it's a way for me to get some labor out, and they
Yep.
get to earn money, and they can earn interest on that money too while it's being set back for their future. But really, like I said, my wife, she was a part of it for so long, and she was a big part of helping the business grow, making sure anything that
Mhm.
needed to be done. If I didn't have time to do it, I couldn't focus on it. She could be doing that part of the business, and then my mom, she's a big part of it now.
And I think that really helps the bond of the family stay strong too. I mean, it's not just what do we do when dad's off of work. It's a part of what dad does with us at work as well. And I've been incorporating my kids as well. Yeah, the tax you spoke to is I think it's 12,500 per year per child. Yeah, and it helps a lot, right? I mean, it's money you don't have to pay taxes on. To your point, you can put that away for them. Make sure that they have something for the future. Let that grow a little interest as well, some interest bearing account, and it's a win win.
Now, sometimes my wife, uh, she's not treated like an employee. We'll just say that. Much more nice about what I would give her, and
Okay,
how I would instruct her.
because she's not on the payroll, right? I mean, from a business standpoint.
She still is technically, because she's my wife. I can pay her a certain amount. She helps out with
Hmm.
like the books and different things like that. So I've
Okay,
got money that goes towards her. That way, we're building her Social Security some, you know,
okay,
because her job now doesn't really pay that well. She's mainly doing it because of the fact that she gets to be involved with the school with our kids, and so
yeah, yeah.
she
I
is.
was gonna
She is
say she went as a teacher, right, or assistant,
mhm.
something like that.
Well, she's
Okay,
like the athletic director, and then she's
okay,
also a part-time PE teacher.
okay, okay. But at their school, so that's
Mhm.
perfect. That's great. What a great way to spend time with the kids. Get that little extra in every day.
Oh yeah.
If you wanted one more, Walrus says you could support him. He is ready to be adopted. So if you if you want to pull him in, but I think Nick says he's a tax liability, so just be careful.
We don't have any health insurance around here.
No, sorry, Walrus.
No
Sorry. Yeah,
benefits.
yeah. No benefits at all. All right. Well, with that, we'll maybe talk a little bit about the business and get a little deeper on that side. I know you started eBay in 2008, but you actually had the business running for quite some time. Give us a little bit of background on when did it really transition into something real? Did you run this kind of like some people start a business just out of their personal account for the first 5 years and then you kind of formalize it at a certain point? Give us a little bit of background behind that transition between when it started to become something more on the side versus an actual business for you, even though you were making money to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it started because I wanted to complete my original three sets. I was missing like an Articuno, a Clefairy, something else. So I was just selling my extras, and that's when it just kind of, I started selling more extras, and then I quickly realized you could make some money. But I do remember there was a moment when I sold a PSA 9 Tails first edition
Mm,
from base set. It was an English copy. I sold it for $90, and I remember thinking to myself, if I could do this every day, I could live off of this. I mean, this is more money than my family's seen in a day for money that they put it, that they've got from work or from wherever. Um, and so for me, if I could make this amount of money, like I'd be living like a king, especially if it's just me. And so I started. I mean, I just kept at it, I kept pursuing it, and I guess it didn't really turn into an actual business until I took that leap. After I
okay.
graduated, and I was like,
Okay.
I did move back home. I had a little 4 by 10 room that
Hmm.
had actually had, the bunk bed was moved in there, and Well, my
I'm
screen
still
go.
with you. Yeah.
Sorry, my screen went black, so I guess I haven't moved my mouse or anything in a while. But uh, if you go outside of my living room, where I slept, there was a little room. There was it used to be a porch, but it was a little 4 by 10 room.
Okay.
It wasn't big at all. But I set up a desk there, and that's when I went full time, and that was my first little office, and that's
Okay.
where I lived with my parents after I got back from college for I guess it was till about January. So it was from about May to January the
Okay.
following year. And that's when I got my first apartment.
So
But I guess that's when,
2013-ish.
it was really when the transition happened.
And did you make it like in a business and you registered with the state at that point, or were you still just kind of running it on a personal level, meaning like out of your
So you
personal
don't
bank
have to
account, things of that
register for a
nature?
business, or at least at the time you didn't, because I'm just a sole proprietorship. In fact, that's still what I am. Dan over here talking about this
C
S
corp and
corp
S
thing
corp,
over and
and
over again has got me thinking, am I paying tens of thousands of dollars every year like that I shouldn't be?
yeah,
After his last, I think it might have been Pokey Flips. I actually emailed my CPA and I was like, should I be an S corp? Like, is there a reason I'm not? And so we're supposed to have a conversation about that and see what the
okay,
benefits are. But
all right. Well, yeah,
I think I did get
he
my
definitely.
resale tax and my resale ID. I did get. I didn't wait like Z and G till just these past few years to get that thing. I haven't been paying sales tax in a while.
Yeah, I remember that conversation where Z and G said something like, "What you can buy and not pay sales tax if you're reselling? Seriously?
Yes.
How am I just hearing about this?" And I think it was actually on a live with Dan and I think Old School was there. Yeah, I think Old School Pokemon was there. Yeah, they were telling him, "Yeah, you don't have a reseller certificate?" I said, "No, I don't." Yeah, yeah, I remember that conversation. All right, so you kind of kicked it off. You're working out of your new office, somewhat of a sole proprietor. You got your reseller certificate. You started the eBay again in 2008, but again, obviously at this point, we're probably speaking 2013 because you graduated college. So that probably puts us somewhere around 2012, 2013 range,
Mhm.
right? So, um, when did it really start to scale up for you? Not obviously at the level you're at now, because it's probably somewhat progressive year over year, but when did it really start to scale up and you say, you know what, I need to build some extra space, I need inventory? Did that come before you opened the store? What was the sequence of events there?
Generations. That was the breakout set for me.
Okay.
I At this point I moved into our double wide trailer. This is 2015, late 2015, early 2016, and
Okay.
I actually had a full office in the back room of the trailer, and I've got a little closet where I had built-in shelves. I'd customize them so I could put uncut sheets in there and stuff. But I remember when I saw Generations was coming out, I ordered a ton of it. Like I had distribution, but a lot of the
Okay.
distribution that I was buying through was like Hills or somewhere else. This is when I bought a ton from my distributor, and so I had hundreds and hundreds of the Generations Mythical Collection box with the Mew. That was the first collection box to come out, and prior to that, I guess nobody thought that that was going to be a big hit set. But when it come out, when I was breaking down these packs. I mean, you had Mega Charizard. I was selling that
Hmm.
card for like $69.99. That was an unheard of price for new cards, especially since it wasn't playable. The Mew was bringing $2 or $3 a piece. The pins were bringing money. I mean, everything
Mm.
was, and these collection boxes were less than $8 a pop. And I had hundreds and hundreds that I broke down, but the singles had such a high hit rate from Generations because you had the Radiant collection,
Yep.
and then you had the Flareon, the Pikachu's. I mean, I had these giant stacks of those Radiant collection cards, but I sold everything at this point. I was selling art sets of every card within the set, individual
Hmm.
cards. I was selling art sets of reverse
Play
hollows,
sets.
complete
Yep.
sets, common sets, everything. But there was so much EV from those packs that by the time it rolled around that the next one was coming out, I can't remember which one was second. Maybe it wasn't was it Manaphy or Darkrai or something like that? I'm looking at the ones now.
Yeah, Darkrai was in one of them. Because the Mew you're speaking about is the one with the rainbow, right?
Yeah, the Mew was the first
Yeah.
one. There was 11 different ones, but by the time they come out with the second one, like people were just like throwing in huge numbers at distributors, but they weren't basing your how much you got off of what numbers you gave them at that point. They were basing off what you ordered from the first round. And because I had ordered so
Mm,
much of the first round, I got huge numbers for all of the generation sets. So
wow.
that's when I was scaling this stuff, and I kept putting in higher numbers too. And like with the red blue collection boxes, the elite trainers, all that stuff. I got really high numbers and high allocations for all those cards. And what was cool about those is it was a breakout set for me selling codes because you didn't get a
Really?
code card inside of the booster pack. The only way you get the
Oh,
generation booster
okay.
packs is from the collection boxes. So, like, if you got a mythical collection box where it come with the code, you got 2 generation packs with that code. So those codes were super expensive. Like, you could just sell them like crazy. I mean, they were like
Wow.
$2 a piece. I mean, they were just flying out the windows or flying out the window. And so I bought as much of that stuff as I could. And I remember I had a building built in my backyard where I would store them in a loft. And like I was still super cheap at this point. Like I built a pretty big loft. I mean, it's 14 foot wide. It's 14
Okay.
and 14 because the building itself is a
Okay.
30 by 40. So on the inside, you got 28 feet length, and it was about, I think it was 3 sheets of plywood deep. So you're looking at 12 feet deep. I built that entire
Okay.
loft for $200. Like I did it all out of 2x4s, just stacking them, and you could get fir wood and you could get the cheap pile wood, and I would just stack stuff up there, which wasn't great for the long term because it didn't have air. It wasn't heated, but at the time the cold
Yeah.
air was fine with it, but there's still some contracting. And but so I had cases of the Charizard EX boxes. I tried to set back, I think it was 10 cases or something like that of each mythical collection, and those come in 24 count
Okay.
cases. And then I set, and the stuff that I broke down, I mean, I had these giant boxes of generations. I mean, there were like thousands of packs in each one of these boxes, and I would carry them up, and I would just set them up there for rainy days. If I got caught up or I got bored, I would go back there and get it. And eventually that stuff, I mean, it really got up in price. Like I'm still selling some of the Charizard EX boxes now. I'm down to my last few, but they were like 300-400 bucks, something like that. I think they come down to about 250, 300, but still, I mean, that's a huge markup
Yeah.
from paying $12 per collection box. I mean, that's a lot of percentage gain in a
Massive.
very short time. I mean, those packs, I mean, during the pandemic, I mean, they were up around 50 bucks a piece. And that's not that much of a gap right there. I mean, you're talking about a 4-year gap to see something go from $1, $2 a piece, because you could even get those on like after a while they went down in price. Like you could get this
Mm.
stuff. Like I said, when I went to Evo with Troll and Toad, and I visited Matt,
Talented. Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna take a case of that mythical collection box. And the Keldeo was around forever, and you could
Yeah.
just get those cases you'd have those packs that were super cheap, but the codes would still sell because people want those generation packs, and you got the promo. And I remember sending Troll and Toad bulk stacks of the Mew promo because I mean that was the one that I had the most of. Like I bought a ton of those things, and I asked them, "Can I sell these as full arts?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And so I would sell them for $1 a piece. And that card, I mean, it's worth a whole lot more than $1 now, but that's what I bulked out. And even Charizard EX, that was the first full art
Wow.
Charizard EX from that era, even though it wasn't textured, but it had like the Magmar on it and all that stuff. I had
Hmm.
2 complete binders of the front and back. So 720 of those that I had just set back for a rainy day. And eventually I graded those into PSA, but I picked them all up for under $5 a piece because people were just dropping them after, like, it was so
They
popular in
open
the
the box.
beginning. And the EV was huge, and then it went to nothing. And I picked up a ton of stuff during that time. I even had a friend of mine, Rock Carolina. I don't know if anybody here remembers him, but Brian at Rock Carolina, he still has an eBay now. He actually worked out of Raleigh, and me and him, we did a ton of
Mm.
business together. I got blocked from one of these sellers for some reason. I guess that because they saw that I was buying all their cards, and I was like, "Hey man, can you go in here and buy all of his Charizard EXs, and I'll pay you $5 a piece?" So he went in there and he was able to buy the full stack quantity. It was like 1,000 quantity at once. I can't remember who it was from, but he just wiped them out and then he sent them to me, and he made like 50 cents a card or something.
Man.
I just sent them back, and eventually I graded them. If Z and G ends up hearing this, he's he's been auctioning off Charizard EX's XY 121 for like, it feels like a year now. 3 of PSA 8s and 3 of PSA 9s, every week. And I'm still bringing in money from him, but I haven't sent stuff to him in a long time, and I still got 2 or 3 boxes of those things sitting up there. I've got a 10 going in that 24-hour auction as well.
Yeah, that was definitely one I could see projecting you forward and really capitalizing the next stage of your business. And kind of going back where this came from, did that really then set you up to say, hey, I want to open a store? Did it go kind of after this kind of settled down? And I don't know exactly what year you opened the store because that to me is a bit of a mystery. So I want to dive into that. But is that where you kind of jump from, okay, now I got some great capital, the business is running at a much higher level, it's somewhat sustaining. Let me see what I can do with a store. Was that the
So
flow?
it was that year, but
Okay.
that's not what made me think of opening a store. I always wanted to do it, but I remember I had a guy locally. He come and made a visit because he was selling bulk lots on eBay and he needed more bulk. And the
Okay.
going rate at that time, it was at its peak. It was like 7 cents a card, commons,
Mm,
uncommons,
wow.
super high. So you can make a lot of money off of bulk. And he wanted to pick it up. So I was thinking, yeah, great. I don't have to ship it. You come get it. Fine. He
Yep.
come in there and he saw what I had laid out inside of my little office area because I didn't break down all the collection boxes. Usually I kept about 2 cases, and that was just so that I could sell those collection boxes. At the time, shipping was cheap. Like you could ship a Mega Deancy EX box, for example.
Mm,
Those would fit inside of the one of the largest bubble mailers, and you could ship it for under the priority rate because it was still 16 ounces. You didn't have ground advantage at that time, but you'd be
okay.
looking at like $3 or $4 to ship that out.
Oh, that's not bad.
Now people just get mad because it gets damaged or because somebody stomped on it, and I get it. And I don't even want to take that risk anymore. But I had this stuff laid out on my shelves, and he come in there and he was like, "Man, you've got more inventory, Pokemon inventory, than any trading card shop in the area." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
break down most of it." And he was like, "Well, just look at what you have not broken down right here. You would make a really good display if we opened up a shop." And so that kind of put a
Mm,
little, just a little
little
light
bug in your
bulb
head. Yeah.
over my head. Yeah, I didn't want to fully click it on, but it did eventually lead to opening up a shop. Of course, that was
Mm,
something I had to discuss with the wife, something I had to pray over.
right.
And we did end up opening up a shop, and I opened it up with this guy. His name was Matt.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was definitely a fun transition. I loved having all of the extra space just to be able to lay everything out. And there were so many things that I really liked about having a shop, but then there was so much more added stress with it that I didn't end up
Right.
sticking with that.
And I didn't get a chance, and if you've talked about this in other places and I missed it, I apologize for making you repeat this. But what was it like on day one? Because I mean, obviously the shop was filled with all of your inventory, things out of your home, your collection, things you've been holding, and to probably see it all laid out and then open on door a day one. What was that like for you?
So I'm trying to remember if this was day one or if we had it later on, but we had like a grand opening
Hmm.
and we invited some friends over, but there was like I had stuff all over the place, and it was really cool to watch and to sort through all the errors from the card readers, and
Mm,
just have the family there. I don't remember a ton about it other than I think there was just a lot of free stuff because I had free bins,
okay.
and that come from one of my largest purchases ever out in Jonesboro back in 2015. That was a find of a lifetime. That was
That was
kind
the
of
one you had to
crazy.
go to the U-Haul for.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
insane. But I had so many tubs full of stuff that I thought it was just worthless things that nobody would want. And I would just set it out in the shop and I would just leave it in these tubs and people would come by and just kind of pick things out as they wanted over the years. And I remember I had those out then, but I think that was the day that if you spent $30, I would give you an uncut sheet. So for every $30 you
Whoa,
spent, you could get a chrome art box uncut sheet. There was
that's so cool.
I had picked up a pallet of that stuff. It was a pallet load of that. It was maybe 200 sheets or so. It was about that thick, but it was heavy, heavy, super heavy. But I picked up the entire skid, and
Mm,
I had just kept it in a closet for the longest time. It's like nobody wants an art box, right? And so my way of making money back on that thing was, when people come into the shop, they spent $30, they got one. And so if somebody come up, they bought a booster box, they might get three of those sheets. And
mm,
eventually they all sold. I sent a bunch of, well, I sold most of them. I sent a bunch to Troll and Toad as well in Evo. And then like a leak in the roof wiped out 50 of the sheets. So I
no.
got paid out my asking price, which at the time was like $400. So it was like Well, that was great. Like, I wish I had, you know, put in a higher price on there, because the way I was selling them, I'd sell
Yeah.
one and then I would increase the price. I'd sell another one, I'd increase the
Right.
price, and that's just kind of how I did it. But when the water hit it, the insurance payout was just for whatever my active price was.
Current
And
price. Yeah.
crazy enough about that, they didn't even tell me it happened. I
Oh.
messaged them and I was like, "Hey, what happened to my Art Box uncut sheets?" And this was months after it happened. And they're like, "They got destroyed. I thought we already sent you a message and paid you out." I'm like, "No,
No.
no, you might want to check on that." And they're like, "Wow, I thought we sent you an email. Yeah, we'll cut you a check." I was like, "Was there anything else destroyed?" And they're like,
Right.
"Yeah, I think so." And then they come back and it was only like a couple $100 worth of stuff. So I don't know what actually happened, but I know that the uncut sheets, um, I did have the quantity and I got to pay out on that. It was like 20 some thousand. It was like 21,000, something like that.
Wow. Okay. Because it was 400 a piece at that point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So day one, you're giving out free stuff everywhere. Sheets are flying off the shelves. $30 spend, and you're running now your store. You're living the dream. Well,
Yeah.
your dream for many of us. I know you got deep into playing. You were taking up your employees' time and your customers' time. You were just playing Pokemon all the time. TCG game, that is. Um, what were some of the best moments in that store for you?
Mm. I'd probably say when I got to sit down and play the game with some of the kids,
Yeah.
like that was fun.
Yeah.
There was also times where we would I'd get a pallet of stuff, and I remember with Guardians Rising, that set, I broke down so much of that set
Mm.
because it had Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele was huge in the meta, and I think at the time, I want to say it was 38 cases. I got it in. That was like my initial wave or whatever. And when I got in those 38 cases of boxes, I started opening them, and people that were in there were like, "Hey, we'd like to open some." And like, like, if you want to, that's fine. And they were they were like, "You don't have to pay us. We just want to open it." And so there was this table, and they were all just sitting there, just opening packs up, and they were looking at the cards. And we
That's
ended up,
cool.
I mean, we burnt through those cases so fast because they were just enjoying being able to open the set and see the cards. They didn't
Mm.
have to pay for the product, and I didn't have to pay them for labor. So it was like a win-win.
Hmm. Hmm. They get the experience without any of the
Mhm.
hits, unfortunately. But yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely got the fix of opening the packs. And I know you mentioned there were struggles there as well. And running a business, as you said, has huge overhead. Um, Lots of nightmares of which Mason is always frequent to tell us about. What were some of your struggles in running that store for the first time, and probably, to my knowledge, your really first brick and mortar, right? So,
Mhm.
what were those struggles that you ran into?
So for me, time management, that was kind of tough. Figuring out when I need to be home with my
Mm,
family, when I need to be there at work.
right.
Family is going to trump my work. But at the same time, if I'm not at work, it's not getting done, the way that I would want, or it's not getting the quality. Matt, he was a great guy to run the card shop, but there were things that he wasn't able to handle. Like I still ran the eBay, I still ran the messaging. I had to
Mm,
be there physically at the shop to do a lot of that stuff. I had to be there to know what was coming in for inventory, what was going out. Because at this time, I mean,
see.
this is when I was running all the single cards. I mean, there were mornings I'd wake up and there'd be 300 orders. I mean, the most orders I ever had overnight on like a weekday was like, I believe the number was 457 orders. I mean, that's a lot of orders that you have to find, pack, and get out, because I like
Wow.
getting it out that same day. I don't like carrying over work from the previous day because that's how you're going to get
Yeah.
behind. And there was a weekend where I had over 600 orders.
Wow.
When I never work on Sunday, at least not with the eBay stuff. Well, there have been sometimes I have brought in some work, but that's the day that I try to make sure that I set of importance. And Saturday, I would work Saturday mornings, but you got to have time for family too. You got to have time where you take
Yeah.
off. And I will say, when I did take off, it was nice having somebody there who could still run things in the background. Uh, Eventually, I did have Matt's wife. She come in and she would do. Her name was Charlene. She would do some of the shipping, and she was pretty good at that. But the struggles with the time management of when I stepped away, I felt like I wasn't
Mm,
as much a part of the business, and I think parts of it did suffer because of that. Um, I did also I did run into issues with like the overhead, but they weren't something that I couldn't handle with sales
okay.
because I had a lot of sales that would generate outside of the shop because of the eBay, because of things that
Right.
I had that come from old collections that I got for near nothing. So that could cover a lot of that stuff. But I also wanted to be self sustaining. And if it wasn't self sustaining, then, and I'm not there, then what's the point of the shop? Because if I'm not enjoying the shop, because I'm not there because somebody else is managing it and it's not actually making money, then what's the point of having that? Because once you get into having multiple employees, I think it's at the 3 or 4 mark, you got to have like workers' comp, and then you got to
Right.
make sure people are rotating in and out. And there were other issues that can come up, with any business, just disagreeing with people on how they're doing things. But for the most part, you know, it was also
Right.
coming out of Pokemon Go and going into like Rebel
Mm,
Clash, sets like that
okay.
when sales were
That was
really
tough.
low. I mean, it was tough to move that kind of product. And in a shop like that, the majority of sales are going to be coming from your new product. And while I
Right.
did run Magic, I ran other card games as well. There were certain things that I wish I'd never done. Like if I went back and did it again, I wouldn't touch comics. Comics,
Mm,
I was told, was like something that you had to have for a trading card shop. Just have it there. Make sure they have the option to do it. Man, that was a suck. Like I would not do comics again. I don't want to deal with. I think it was Alliance. I mean, or
oh yeah. Yeah.
Diamond. I think it
They,
was Diamond. Diamond and Alliance. Maybe it was both.
I think they do
That,
both. They both do comics. Yeah.
that was just dumb. Like I wouldn't go back and do that again for nothing. And if I branched out into other card games, I would make sure that anything I'm buying is something that is actually paid for. Force of Will was a huge game when I was there. It
Mm,
it really tapered off quick, but I had a bigger player base for Force of Will than I think I did for Pokemon.
huh.
Magic was the most consistent, but at times Force of Will even dwarfed them. So
Was this in your local town where you saw the shop? So where you had the shop?
yeah,
Okay.
it was in
Okay.
Hildebrand. It's kind of where I grew up.
Okay.
It's about 7 minutes from where I'm at.
Okay. So you kind of saw things not quite working out like you anticipated. You didn't see it running as a self-sustaining business. Um, what made you say, you know what, let's close the doors. This is it's reaching an end, and I need to go ahead and just pull the plug, and let's go back to working from the house.
Well, I'd gotten away from collecting during that time period, and I wanted to
Yeah.
get back
Right.
to collecting. So
Mm,
I decided I was going to do that. I mean, there were other factors as well, the that were not related as much to Pokemon. Like my at the time, I had 2 kids. I mean, I had so we're going in. This is 2017 when the decision was made. So my daughter Sarah, she was born in late 2016. So that first year, I mean,
mm,
she's going into being a full on baby at this point. To me, the first few months are actually a little bit easier than
yeah.
like the first 6 months are probably gonna be a little bit easier than the second 6 months because
Right.
with the
Sleeping
the
and
kids they
yeah.
sleep a lot, in that first
Yeah.
6 months and they're a lot more quiet. But once they get real vocal, I mean, babies let you know what they want, and you know, maybe I was just tired at the time. I don't know, but we've got 2 kids, at that point, and it was probably good that we did get out because we ended up going into a third pregnancy in 2019, and I don't know what would happen with COVID, but that time period there allowed me to go back to collecting as well, because when the
Okay.
doors did shut, it was a relief that come over me. And I knew that I was going to be able to get back to something that I hadn't really done a whole lot of because
Mm,
when you're in a brick and mortar, like that's a big focus of your life, making sure inventory is taken care of, insurances, you got to make sure that everything's being cleaned, changed out. The trash bags are fresh every morning. Somebody's taking the trash to the dump because we don't have pickup around here. We had leaks in the water. You got to make sure people aren't breaking in. You've got other card stores saying, "Hey, your name's the Charizard Authority. Authority, you can't do that. We're going to report you to Nintendo." Nintendo's calling up saying, "Hey, we heard about this. Can you get this changed?" And then you've got other card stores claiming that You're selling them fake cards. And actually, we did have that happen. Somebody,
Mm.
uh, you know, one of the workers at a local store came to our shop, sold us some cards, and then someone else bought them back from their shop, and then they come back and said we were selling fake cards, and it was like this big ordeal. I mean, it was.
Mm.
I wasn't there to see it all happen, but I took ownership of it because my employees, they couldn't verify a lot of the stuff. I did have cameras. In fact, I had to go out there one time because somebody was pulling cards out of the thing and they were trying to steal them. And
Uh,
going back, I may have pressed charges, but the reason I didn't was because his two kids were there and I knew them pretty well. And honestly, I just didn't want that to happen right there in front of them. He gave
right.
the cards back. The police were there. Really, us going downtown in the middle of the night, I didn't feel like it, but I may have changed my decision in hindsight, only because I actually found out he was involved in a murder a few weeks later.
Mm.
And so he ended up going away anyways. And that may have been the change that he needed to
Right.
keep him from doing that.
It
And
could have been the one thing that stopped it. Yeah.
yeah, but hindsight's always different than, the decision you make in the moment, which you can only base off of what you know.
Exactly. Yeah, did the best you could, and I mean, obviously you're coming from the heart. Try not to let the kids see their dad go through something like that, right there in front of them, and give him a second chance, and hopefully make a better decision. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So you closed the doors, you got the relief, got back to collector Rusty. You actually touched on it a little bit, and I do want to hear the story. I know that. Well, I think that the Charizard Authority came from those right there in college years, just mass churning and burning. To your point, the Charizards at maximum profits. buying at 5, selling at 10. Um, is that the actual name of the store, and is that why you've gave yourself that name throughout the process? But then maybe as a follow up to that is, how did Nintendo actually come at you, and what was the whole potential legal issue that you tried to avoid?
Yeah, so that's where the Charizard Authority came from. It was just buying and
Just the
selling
churn and burn.
Charizards. It was the
Okay.
the bread and butter of the business. For a while there, I focused on Charizard from base set, and I focused on Mirror Force. It's on Yu-Gi-Oh side. Mirror Force is not the Charizard of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I focused on Mirror Force because I really liked it. I've got some childhood memories with that, but it was really playable. And Blue Eyes White Dragon really wasn't playable. So I didn't buy as many of those, but the Mirror Forces I could turn and burn. But yeah, that's where the Charizard name comes from. And when Nintendo approached me, they actually gave me a call. They called me up and asked me
Mm.
if I was the Charizard Authority, whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's the name of my
Can,
store. And they're like,
can
well,
can I
the
speak to the
trademark,
Charizard Authority?
you really can't do that. And I'm like, why not? I mean, I see it all over the place. People using Pokemon and Charizard and names and
Hmm.
stuff. I'm like, well, you were reported, so we were following up with it. It's trademark infringement. Um, can you have that
Mm.
changed? And I'm like, sure, I can have that changed. What about my website? Like, yes, if you have a website with that in the name, make sure you change that. And like, anything else? What about like my Facebook? And they're like, again, we're not aware of that, but yes, you would
Now
need to
that you
change
mention it.
anything that has the Charizard Authority in it. So I went through that whole ordeal trying to get everything changed, my eBay store name, all that stuff. And because
Wow,
I had
that's a
mentioned
mess.
those things in the phone call, when I followed up with them in an email, I had to make sure that I provided links that showed that it didn't have that anymore in it. And
Nice.
the most difficult thing to change was actually Facebook. My eBay username was pretty
Mm.
easy to change. What I wanted was just the I wanted TCA Gaming for my store name, but I couldn't get that. It's actually like the TCA Gaming store or something like that
Okay.
because somebody else had that, even though the username was available, and I was never able to get it. So Facebook took forever. They took like a month for me to be able to get
Mm.
approval to change it, but everything else was pretty easy. I had to create a new website and just redirect everything. So
Okay.
eventually I dropped the Charizard Authority domain, or I may still own it. I don't know. I can't remember. For a while there, if you went to the charizardauthority.com, it just redirected you to TCA Gaming.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was wondering the kind of origin story and how it shifted. And I knew that Pokemon/Nintendo had reached out to you. I was like, wow, what an issue. And obviously, with the recent scare, I think that was happening on, what was it, Instagram
Yeah.
last year and all the Pokemon stuff. It was like, okay, this is a real thing, real thing. Looking here, Retro says, can Rusty speak to his Bitcoin position? Yeah, zero. And it's growing by that much every day, Retro.
The closest I've been to buying a Bitcoin was when it was right at 22,000. Maybe it was
Mm.
a few months back, and I had created an account and I was going to buy it, and I was like, I can't. It's not like taking my payment. Like, what is this? Is too complicated. I just shut it off and I let
That's
it
it.
go. And I wish I had
You
now.
walked away.
Isn't it like 50 grand or something crazy?
That would have been a good return. Yeah, that would have been a good one. But yeah, once you reach the technical hassle, you step away. That's it. We're done. Retro will he'll do it for you. He'll do it for you. All right, man. Let's look a little bit now at your business, the present moment. So we kind of talked through where you started, you kind of growing through that journey, coming through the LGS to the card store, shutting that down, moving back into the collector you, and a little bit about the name. But now the present. I know about 4 months ago when you were with John, you kind of gave us a quick little tidbit on how the business has been going for you, and obviously the growth. And I think at that time your 90-day sales from an eBay perspective was like 1.1 million, and you were about 5,000 items sold in the last 90 days, which was, obviously, as I said, perpetual growth for you year over year. How has the past 90 been for you from that last 4 months ago?
That's probably down a little bit because I think it was. Let me see. I know I did have a 90-day that was over a million, not too recent, but then I also had one that was like 800. Which this is the eBay. Yes. So
Yeah,
right now it's like 831 for my 90 days with 4,700 sold. So
still moving a decent amount of product though.
yeah, it's not too
Obviously,
bad. I just put in my tax information. I think like total sales everywhere. It was just under 5 for the entire year last year, which is the most I've ever
right.
had. But I don't know if I'm going to be at that mark this year or if I'm going to be less. I mean, it's a pretty high amount for me. Like I would think. I mean, if the market moves, maybe it'll go higher. But if the market stays kind of where it is or goes lower, I feel like I could push pretty similar numbers. Maybe a little bit less because I did push about 1 million from my personal collection to make a quick move on that
Mm,
property that come up with the house and the
right.
taxes that I wanted to set back. So maybe it'll be a little less, I would think, this year. I'm not projecting any type of particular growth, but you just never know what might happen.
Yeah, market does crazy things sometimes, which is really a good way for us to talk about. Are you looking to move into something new? Because I think originally you had focused a lot on singles. Obviously, graded cards were mostly there for the latter part of your business, but now it seems to be more graded and perhaps sealed and box breaks. And you stepped away from singles entirely. Is that correct for the most part?
For the most part, I do have some singles listed, but
Okay,
really, if
just
it's just
high
easy to
end.
list it, if it's not,
Okay,
then I'll send it to someone else or let it
okay,
sit in bulk or something. I wish I could
okay.
get away from like the little nitpicky things that I know don't make any money but take me a lot of time. But it's like something in me doesn't want me to, it doesn't allow me to throw away even like a basic energy card. Like I've got hundreds of thousands of energies, and I still try to make 1,000 card energy lots and sell them for $20 on eBay when I know that I'm going to pay $10 in shipping just to send it out to somebody, and it's going to take forever to make the thing. But I feel good when I send out that 1,000 energies. I may have only made a few bucks off of it, but I'm moving it along to somebody else. Maybe they'll be happy about it. So I don't know. Around Christmas, I'll move about 100,000 energy pretty quick just in those 1,000 card lots, and they'll sell slowly over the rest of the year. So I don't know. I wish I could get away from all the stuff and just flip a switch and know that, you know, the things that aren't making the margin, just let it be, just let it sit and just be done with it and focus on the things that make a whole lot more margin.
You pull an engineer Dan machine robot there. Um, but I think you've said it before, and I can actually relate to this. Is sorting cards is somewhat therapeutic for you. Like you actually enjoy it. Like,
Sometimes, yeah.
yeah, it can be something that is actually somewhat peaceful in a mindset. I know I do sometimes. I'll put on the podcast or put on whoever I'm researching next, and I'll just be sorting some cards and listen seamless. Um, I think you were looking somewhere. Going back to the question actually before I change. So are you looking to move into some different areas of the market now? Are you going to do anything new in this year that you haven't done the prior year, or will it just be business as usual for you?
Yeah, I'm pretty boring. Nothing new that I can think of. If something exciting comes along, maybe. But
Okay. You don't have like any big plans to grow into one space or to move into a different way of doing things or jumping over to Korean or nothing like that.
jumping over to what?
Korean, Korean cards.
Hmm,
Changing languages. Yeah.
Nah. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I've invested more in Japanese product here lately than I have in the past. I mean, like that. Well, I guess most of this row here is like the Cyber Judge Wild Force, which that's not a
Mm-hmm.
great set. I mean, it's not terrible, but they're just so cheap. I just bought cases and set them back, and then the other that whole row is nothing but shiny treasures. I mean, they're just
Okay.
seems like they're pretty cheap. It's a good deal. I invest in English sealed. I'm investing in Japanese sealed. I have a I have most of my net worth in Pokemon, but I have a variety of Pokemon investments, I
It's
guess you
that
could say.
it's diversified within
Yeah,
Pokemon,
yes,
right?
diversified within Pokemon.
Okay. Um, are you thinking that you'll start to get some distribution for Japanese as well, or is that something you're just dabbling in now to see how it goes?
I mean, I just contacted some Japanese people that I know on IG and
Okay.
email. They they can get me cases or boxes that they
That
always
they can
check out.
purchase.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Anytime I've had an
Good.
issue in
Good
the
enough.
past, they always make up for it. Like I had a guy, he's supposed to send me 200 shiny treasure boxes. All are supposed to be in cases, but half of them arrived in cases, and then there was 90 in loose boxes. So it was like 10 boxes
Hmm.
short, and you missed out on some cases. Like, what's going on here? It's like, how about I send you a brand new case so that way you've got 10 extra boxes, and then you've got one more case. I'm like, all right, that works. That's fine because I can
Okay.
sell. I figured the loose boxes I'll sell over time anyways, and this way I get an
Right.
extra 10 boxes. So
Yeah. Works out. Some more free refrigerators. Perfect. um, when you run at the level you do, Rusty, one of the things, and especially, Dan's always jumping to mind when I talk about things like this, but looking at optimizations, you've been doing this for well over a decade. Um, what are some of the things you've really started to optimize? Obviously, not selling energy blocks is one of them, but something else like that you used to maybe say, "Hey, this was very inefficient. I'm doing this a lot better now. I've cut out this step and this step." What have you learned over these, 10 plus years?
hmm. I mean, shipping is usually pretty quick. If usually I'm up here by 6:30, 6:45. I read my Bible, and then I'm on to answering questions on eBay. And whenever I answer questions, if somebody comes in and they're just like, "Hey, what's the lowest you'll go?" or "Hey, will you take $20?" And most of
Right.
the time, I don't even answer that stuff anymore. If it's a good offer, I'll send them an offer based off of their price or something that's a counter. But if the offer's just too low or they're asking me to compete with myself, I don't even answer that anymore. So I can run through the questions that I get on eBay. Usually within 20, 30 minutes, I'll have everything that I need to answer quickly. Anything that requires a picture or something like that, I let it sit in the
Wait.
inbox, and I'll take care of it after I do shipments. Then I go into shipments and I go do bulk orders. I'll go through, combine everything, make sure I don't have any consignment payments that I need to record or
Okay.
whatever. And I'll print all the labels. And once I print all them labels, I can get everything pulled from the different stacks of boxes or wherever I need to. Usually that don't take me about 20 minutes or so. And now I'm at 8 o'clock, and I've already got every order
Okay.
that needs to be shipped out for the day with its correct label. And then my mom, she'll come in and she'll take care of that. Normally it might take her an hour or so, on Mondays, maybe 2 hours, something like that. So really, I have
Gotcha.
shipping done for the day before a lot of people even get up and go to work. And then I can focus on whatever I need to at that point. I can focus on those questions that might have pictures or pulling a
Mm,
specific order for somebody. Like somebody messaged me on IG today. They're like, "Hey, I would like to buy all of your, I think it was EX Dragon and EX Team Magma, Team Aqua cards that are below $40 and have a grade at least a 7. They're not trainer, they're not energy. You know, you can, if you know how to do your different searches and stuff and you got everything bookmarked, you can quickly pull all those listings down, and then you can copy those listings into Excel. You throw in a few different changes with format or whatever, and now you've got every single item thrown in Excel. It's got the price there, and then you can take 10% off, send it back to him. He's got an invoice within a few minutes of confirming that he actually wants to do that price. So it's like
mm,
really simple when you can move stuff over like that. Same thing with consignments. Like whenever I do
mhm.
consignments, I get it taken care of as soon as I get that order, as long as it's possible. And I'll get the stuff listed. As soon as I have the items listed, I like having those little identifiers in the title, because then I can go to my scheduled
Right.
listings and I can say it's CS6. I'll put CS6 in there, pulls all that person's orders up. I copy the page, paste it into Excel, and then again I have all of his
This is it.
exact listings, titles, and everything is linked. I'll copy into the Google Doc. It's all nice
Mm,
and neat. All the formulas are there. And I realize it's probably not as succinct or cool looking as some of these other consignments, but it gives you the information that you want. It's all there. You can click on any of your items. You can see the
jump
exact
right to
fee
it.
breakdown. So like
Yeah.
it's all like a quick process. Anything that takes too long with what I'm doing, honestly, I pushed it out. Like I used to love selling all of the individual cards on my own website, but it takes so
Right.
long to process
Mm.
those orders when somebody goes through and buys 200 individual cards for a quarter a piece. Like, yeah, I'm not going to move that on my personal eBay because you got to charge at least $1.
Right.
But when I do sell cards on eBay, like I can bulk ship and print everything out and be done by 8 o'clock with, 50, 60 orders. Whereas 50, 60 orders on my own website, when I have to go through and process each individual one and make sure the tracking's there and make sure they're contact, that might take me 4 or 5 hours. So like
Right.
it's not worth it at that point. I can spend those extra 4 or 5 hours doing something else.
Mm,
Listing cards that are worth $500 more than every single card that just sold. So for me, I think if it feels like it's taking too long and you're not making enough money for it, it probably is. And see if there's a way that you can speed things up or make a process that can be combined with something else. So like
right.
those are just a few examples of things that, I've been able to do, but some of that process is quicker with me because I have somebody like my mom who can package that stuff. And then she can
Right.
also take it to the
Sure,
post
bro.
office, because I can
Mm,
only drive
okay.
but so fast. Like I can't get that. I can't change the speed limit. So it's going to be 7 minutes for me to drive to the post office and 7 minutes back, no matter how efficient, of a car I get or how fast I want to drive. Like that's going to be the time that it takes. So if that's something that my mom can handle for me, like that really that gives me back life,
Right.
where I can put that into something else, or I can take off half an hour early so that I could
Go see the
see my
kids.
family for supper on a night where I'm
Right.
going to have a live stream.
Sorry about that, by the way.
You bet.
Sorry
Oh,
about that. If, yeah, we've been on the live stream here tonight.
well, my kids were going to bed. My wife, she might be trying to stay up, but she probably won't. It's getting pretty late, so she's probably not up at this point.
Make sure you give her my regards. I appreciate her sharing your time with us and the kids as well. Oh, yeah, I mean, a lot of those efficiencies definitely will start to come out. Now, I think, and I could be wrong, but I definitely think you probably um, don't take into account all the expert, details you picked up over the years, like how do you sort your cards and things of that nature that you probably changed and shifted and said, okay, well, I'm gonna do it by number, or I'm gonna do it by, whatever set. And
Yeah.
those kind of nuances definitely, shift over the years. And as even myself, a very small scale, as the inventory grew, I was like, okay, well, that previous system did not work. Let me
Mhm.
change this, and I need to be able to pull this order in 30 seconds. And yeah.
Yeah, I used to, when I had single cards, I used to do everything by set because it was
Hmm.
easy to grab a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
because it would be together. But now with graded cards, because almost everything is like individual, I've got shoebox row, like the BCW shoe boxes. I
Yep,
have all of those where
I have one.
everything's alphabetical now, like from A to Z.
Okay.
And each one of the boxes is labeled like A1, A2, A3, whatever. So like if I need a Charizard, I'm going to go to one of the C boxes. It's probably going to be C2 or C3 because
Mm,
there's so many different Charizards, and then I'll pull it out. Of course, you have an idea of where it is because you put it in there, and you're going to be pulling a lot of these cards out. But when I sell an Anorith from Power Keepers graded CGC 9.5, that I listed 2 years ago, you know, I might not know where in that A box it is, but at least I know it's in one
right.
of these three boxes because I've got over 4,000 different listings for, well, it might be 3,800 now that I ended some of those earlier, but graded cards, and then some of those have quantity anywhere from 1 to 20. So I mean, I've literally got two walls full of graded cards where I have to pull from, but it's all in within reach. And usually, if I can pull an order within 30 seconds if I need to. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it might be more if it's extra frustrating or I messed up and sent the card off to somebody else already.
Yeah. Yeah. I've tried by actually number. So list the certificate number. So as I'm selling it, I know exactly the cert that I sold, and we don't get mixed up with, okay, it was not that copy, it was this one, and I had a picture of that one on the site, and somebody got upset, and that's worked out pretty well as well.
This like the certification number, like the whole
Yeah.
certification number. Do you
Yeah.
put that in the
So
title?
no, no, but it's there as I'm looking at it because now eBay has that little link. You can just see it right there. You can
Oh man.
modify your columns. Yeah, that's a lot
See,
easier.
whenever I do like the bulk ship thing, I go from that page because if you refresh that bulk ship page, man, it just jumbles everything up. I don't know why it does that,
Mm,
but
yeah. Okay.
do you use the bulk shipper?
I do. I do. I use bulk ship. When I'm pulling the orders though, or when I'm actually doing the bulk shipping, I have actually relisted my graded cards, with because I was doing it previously under before they allowed you to actually store the certain number, what company graded it. So now I've relisted everything under that new kind of grouping, and which now allows me to have that as a column I can search by, as a column I can download or export. So when you add that to the view, it's a little bit easier. And I like sorting my cards that way because I know exactly the cert that I sold, and it's easier for me just to run the pick list that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
See, I do a lot of stuff that's multi-quantity too, so it wouldn't even have
Mm,
the cert. Like it'd just be blotted out.
okay, okay, yeah. Then that time maybe alphabetical makes more sense. I think I saw one from Walrus here trolling again. Does Rusty want to start a podcast with me called "Who's That Guy," where he roasts me every episode until a very real friendship builds over time, accumulating in a picnic.
The idea of a podcast and the idea of a Discord and things like that all sound great. I don't have time
Time,
to dedicate
time.
towards it. But that sounds fun, Mr. Walrus.
Yeah.
I'm
It was
not a
a
very good roaster though.
no. I think you'd be too nice. You'd be too nice. One of the things I found really funny as I did my research with you, Rusty, was you're running multi-million-dollar business, but you can't get a line of credit over $10,000.
Yeah, yeah, it's not.
But I figured
Even
out
with
why.
eBay.
You really, even with eBay, wow.
With a
If
credit card anyways. I've been offered like those loans. They're like, hey, you
right,
can get a PayPal
business
working
loan,
capital loan for
right,
$150,000. And it's like, you go to look in the details and they're like, it's just crazy the way you got to pay them back.
yeah,
So,
interest is crazy too. Um, but I figured out why now with the story we've had thus far. It was the chapter 13 bankruptcy. That's what it was. They black marked your family, and so now you and hopefully not your kids, but at least you and your mom and your dad they cannot get any credit. So that's what it was. I get it now.
well,
I was like, how can he not get a credit card over $10,000, but he's making millions of dollars every year? Doesn't make any sense.
see, my PayPal MasterCard, I think the limit's like 10, 10, 5. And my wife, she went and applied for one and she immediately got 12, 5. And I'm like, are you kidding
This
me?
is
Like, how much
ridiculous.
money do I push through PayPal? Like, I have a business account with you guys. I can't get this.
Yeah, and you should be able to say, look at my sales over last year. Like it's gonna be easy winning for you guys, but no, I get it. I get it. One of the other things I want to speak to before we jump away, because I do want to spend some time here at the end to touch more on the personal note, and I want to respect their time together. I know we wanted to try to wrap it up, before or at 12. Um, is I wanted to speak a little bit about how your business has evolved. So, you start off much like many of us, looking at singles, buying out collections, going that route, adding to your PC along the way. But you started to add new services. You started to add consignment. You started to be middleman grading. You started to do YouTube advertising, eBay affiliate. All these things came in over certain periods of time and certain milestones. Um, Take us through maybe your perspective, even in retrospect, to say, as you add these services to your business for the listeners, here's something to consider, or here's a good moment for you to maybe consider that service and be careful for X, Y, or Z. Can you maybe talk through maybe a few of those and kind of give your perspective and expertise?
Sure. So middlemaning, I'll address that one because that's something that I still get a lot of requests to do, like
Mm,
middlemaning for grading, middlemaning for shipments. And for me, it's a lot of time and responsibility. Like I know that if I ever needed to, I could attempt to pull that lever again where I'm middleman cards for people to grading companies. But it was not fun. I did not enjoy
mm,
getting in other people's collections and then recording all that information and then taking responsibility for putting it into the system, sending it to the grading companies. Then you got to wait and you got to communicate and you got to make sure all the information is there for the person on the other end, whether it's one card or 100 cards. And eventually you'll get it back. You're going to communicate again, make sure that
right.
they have all the appropriate information, and you have to make sure the cards get back to them safely. Make sure it's in, you're responsible for that until it gets back into their hands. And it was just a long process, and none of it's really all that fun. So for me, I don't like
Mm,
the middlemaning process of like for grading cards, even for like packages. I do occasionally do it for friends, but for the most part, it was something that I didn't enjoy. So even though there was a lot of money to be made, it was easy money. I I've just kind of I pushed away from that. Even
mm,
I still was doing it with the CGC only for live hits that were opened up during the live
the
videos,
live
the
stream.
pack
Right.
breaks up until this last round. I haven't opened it back up again because honestly, I still have stuff out there right now that I'm waiting to be returned. Anytime you have an issue with something, like it it just adds more stress not only to the buyer but also to you, and you're
Right.
responsible and you want to take care of your person. Like I had a couple cards that I believe may have been damaged, sometime between here and there, and while CGC took care of me, it's still, I had to take care of the buyer and make sure that they were compensated off of what we thought the grades may have been,
Mm,
and a lot of times that can get really complicated,
right.
especially if
Dicey.
somebody disagrees with the grade and you're like, and you don't actually think anything happened, or if something was damaged, and I don't know, there's a lot that goes into
Mm,
that, and it's pretty time consuming. You're one person. If you're going to focus your energy on something, you might want to start with something that you really enjoy, because that's going to be the things that you're going to be able
right.
to optimize better. You're going to be able to think more clearly to do it the right way. And you being able to enjoy something is going to make you want to show up early to work. It's going to make you feel okay.
Yeah.
If you have to work late, but at least you're doing something that's going to make you happy and that you can enjoy, and you're going to be a better person too for that. For your
Exactly.
family when you're away from your work. Now, something else that you may want to take into consideration is consignment. There's a lot of similarities with consignment as there's middleman, because when you take on consignments, you're taking in products for other people and you're selling it, and you get paid. Once you get paid, you pay your consignees, you take a cut. For
Right.
me, if most of you know, my rates are probably higher than just about anyone else. You got Z and G, and you got Dan, and you got Old School, you got S and Pratt, you've got Probstein, you got all these places, but I take 20%, $20 minimum. So if you send me a card and it sells for $50, $50, you're only going to get 30. And so that's a huge percentage of a card like that. But what I found was when I was taking in consignments at just a flat 20%, um, I was getting inundated with cards that were just like $50 or less.
Mm.
People were just sending in crazy. I had one guy who sent me in 1,700 CGC cards, and the majority of them were $10 or less, and he wanted me to put them in lots. So I had one lot that was literally 17 cards that they were all graded. Most of them were like 6 and 7 grades from like evolutions, and there were commons.
Oh,
There was like
okay.
Caterpie, and you know, at the end of the day, I might have picked up $200 for that order. And, so I would have got $40
Yeah.
off of it, but that's a lot of work for that. And I found that I really wasn't enjoying it. So at the rate that I've
Mm.
set it at the 20% and the $20 minimum, and I don't accept, sealed product unless I approve of it. I don't accept raw cards unless I approve of it. And there's certain things that I won't take in unless the rate is higher. I have a much smaller pool of consignments that come in,
Mm.
but whenever I get in a consignment, I feel like it's really good quality. And
You enjoy it.
with that quality, I enjoy it. Like this last consignment box that I got in, it was
Yeah.
18 items. I mean, it was like EX era
Really
product that
cool
I'd never
stuff.
seen before. And what's crazy is one of those items sold for about 4 times as much as I thought it would in auction because a private buyer, come in and they snagged it up before it went live tonight. Uh,
Okay.
as we went live, it was at 9 o'clock. But a lot of that other stuff is going to sell really well. And I'm okay with selling things like that because they're unique. It still intrigues me. I'm interested. I like
Right.
taking pictures and looking at it, figuring out what the product is. But most sealed product, I don't want to sell. I don't want to sell somebody's elite trainer from Darkness Ablaze because the set went out of print and now they're going up to 50 or 80 or $100. Like, you keep
Right.
that 3-pound brick to yourself, and you to put in the effort to sell it, because I don't want to put in the effort to sell that thing and then the person who gets it is mad because there's a heat seal hole in the side of it. I'd rather deal with the
Right.
person who's buying $1,000 item and knows what he's getting and have the risk of dealing with them saying there's an issue with the crush box, because I've got insurance that's going to cover that and it's going to be worth it. And I don't want to deal with the negative feedback coming from the $50 elite trainer box that I
Right.
just don't want. I don't even want, like, it's not worth it. You're going to take a huge hit on your side as well. Now, I do still get people who send in items that are only worth 20 or 40 or $50, but I'm getting paid $20. So it's worth it to
Yeah.
me at that point. I put in $20 worth of effort into scanning your picture front and back, making sure I've got a system that crops it for me. That's something that does it succinctly. I put in a title that I think works really well. It goes into my eBay shop where it's not being flooded. No offense to Z&G. Like, I think it's awesome that he has 1,000 items going at a time, but I'm not going to have 1,000 items. There's no way somebody's going to send me that big of a consignment. I might have 100 items in auction at most, maybe 20, maybe 50, maybe even less than that. So there's going to be the same amount of eyeballs that you would get from a bigger place going into your little item, as long as those
Right.
auctions are going through in the right way and I didn't misspell it or do something
Right.
crazy like that. And if there was a mistake in your listing, then I would take care of it. But so for me, with like the consignment part of it, I had to tweak it and change it and remove things that weren't enjoyable to me. It's so that when I do get in those
Mm.
consignments, I do feel like it's worth it. It's no longer a burden. And even still now, like, if I was to do something to change anything with my consignment, I would tighten it even more so that the
Really?
things that I
Okay.
get in are even more worth it for me, because time is really valuable for me right now. I've got 3 young kids that I love to spend time with. I have a wife that when she's off, we might have a few hours, where we're fighting to have a conversation because
Yeah.
you've got the kids who want to
Kids.
tell you about the day and
Yeah.
we want to make sure that their time is important. And we have a few hours at
Right.
the end of the night where we're just laying there and we want to talk about the day, but we've been tried telling each other 5 times. We don't even remember what it was anymore. So
Yeah.
time is valuable. Value your time. If you have more time than money, you don't have a family or you don't have things to do, yeah, put in that grind work. Like, if I wanted to, like, if everything else started failing, as long as people still trusted me, like if I couldn't get the sales, like, I could always dial it back and get more consignments in, or I could
Right.
middleman for other people. Like, if time becomes less valuable and more available, I went my screen again,
Yep. Still got you.
then put in that grind work. But you got to find that medium to where whatever you're doing, you're happy with that. Like, you're going to be able to find the joy in your work so that you can have that joy outside of your work as well.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, it really fuels, to your point, what you're giving to yourself so that you can give it to others, and making sure you can give yourself that enjoyment of the day, not, to your point, kind of hating to wake up and not wanting to get out of bed to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this bunch of $10 cards and
Yeah.
17 card lots. No, no thanks, man. It's just, yeah, not my day. Then you're upset when you get home and snapping at the kids or whatever the case may be. Yeah, fully agree. Good advice. I do want to ask one more thing though, because you mentioned something that I forgot, and I wanted to just mention this to the audience. You've had, again, some great success on the business side and eBay. Do you have maybe a few tips you could share on how you approach naming? Because I know it's very important for you. You focus on that a lot for both yourself and your customers. What's your approach on having like an optimal naming convention for eBay titles?
Oh yeah, I like my titles the way that I have them. That's a pet
Mm-hmm.
peeve I have with the vault. But so I kind of I try to make sure the terms are in the title that would help me find that specific card, and then I can make sure that the broad terms are in there. So I realize now with graded cards, you have to put in the grading card company in the grade. So it may not even be necessary for you to put PSA 10, in the
Right.
title. But I put that right up front because anybody who wants to find your PSA 10 Charizard, they're probably looking for that particular grade. They're looking for that particular company. They may expand it beyond that using the parentheses if you like looking for both CGC and PSA or BGS only or something like that. So I always start off with the little 3-letter acronym, the grade, and then I put the condition. The condition can sometimes be
Mm.
modified a little bit, but I think that's important for the visual aspect of it. And then the name. You got to have the name. And then after the name, I like to put the set number.
Okay.
So for Charizard, a lot of people just put 4, but you know, I put 4/102 for base set because I think it's important within Pokemon. Maybe not so much in other games. Like I think Magic, they don't even really care about the numbers. But with Pokemon, if you're trying to find a base set Charizard, you're going to have 4/102 in there. Or if you're trying to find a Team Rocket Charizard, it's going to be important to have 4/82 because if you just put 4 in there, you might pull up the Charizard
Right.
from base set. You might pull it up from Team Rocket. You might pull up
Mm.
a Charizard, from another side. I think that's the number in base set 2 as well. Like it's 4/130. Or there's a lot of similarities that you can pull from those numbers. There's actually cards that have the exact same full set number in there, but it helps out. It really helps dwindle out some of the other sets. And then after that, I typically focus on the rarity or nuances. So
Mm.
for like base set, I'll put hollow rare in there because I'm not taking the time to put that in item specifics. But
Okay.
I'll bold that because I think that's something that can catch the eye of the buyer. Like if it's a
Mm.
shiny full art or if it's a
Right.
hollow rare or an alternate art. I do that more so with the newer cards, but I've started doing it with the older cards as well because the set, I know that you can put the set in the item specifics
Right.
and you don't have to have it in the title. Not so many, that's not going to necessarily catch somebody's eye that it's from base set, but if they're searching for it, then it's already going to be in the description. So you don't
Right.
necessarily need that in the title. If there's
Mm.
space, I put it in there. If it's first edition, I make sure to have at least first in there. I try to put first edition always in there. Pokemon card, that's just something that it's probably not needed, but for my personal preference, I always try to have Pokemon card at the very end. And then for cards that I'm selling individually that doesn't have multi quantity, I'll go ahead and put the last 3 of the cert number at the end of the title. That just
Mm.
helps me visually identify it when I do go through and pull the
And
order.
pull it.
So
Yeah.
now there are things in there that I would take out over like an error or a misprint type thing, but that's going to be my
Right.
general title sequence. You're going to have PSA 7 near mint. I might abbreviate near mint to NM because I don't think
Right.
near mint is that needed, especially when you're going to have it down
That's
there
great.
with the condition part of it. The name, I always put the name. I always put the number and both the set number and like the the overall set
Right.
identifying number. So like base set would be 102, the rarity. And then if there's room for the set and there's no other nuances in there, I'll put that and make sure there's a Pokemon card at the end.
Great feedback. I got some improvements to make. Clearly.
I'm not saying it's the
Yeah.
best. It might not be, but that's my preference, and it tends to work. And I try to keep it consistent across all of my listings.
And I'm really curious, from a technical perspective, and we won't have an answer here, but what is the impact now? Because obviously, search indexing and the technology behind that is a huge part of why we did what we did previously in titles. But now with all the details there and how they may allow the same search term to then pull from these areas to bring that back up with the same relevance, then to your point, it brings more of a different question to say, even if they got the item to show up, now where's their eye being drawn to? And so I like your point on that as well. Very good. All right. Well, we're going to try to wrap this up with some personal stuff and then we'll bring it to a close. We spoke about it in the beginning, Rusty, and we all know that you're a deeply religious man, and Christianity is a big part of your faith. And I think you even mentioned you go for prayer every morning before you even start your day, and you kind of read some scripture out of the Bible, and perhaps set yourself up for a successful day. Um, I did want to see where the religious background came from, but I think we've already answered that. Are you still really able to regiment yourself to make that a part of your morning every morning, or do you find yourself slipping throughout the days and that really impacts, for example, how you feel? Because I know as a correlation, if I miss my gym workout, I don't feel that great that day, right? So it's those things that we do as a part of a routine to help give us the optimum day. Or how are you able to structure that and make it a permanent part of every day?
So there's definitely been times where I've let myself slip, and I wasn't reading the Bible like I should be. And really, it's something that I've gotten back into the past few months, where it's been more of a daily thing where I've had to make as a priority, because
Hmm.
I feel completely different when I'm not in the Word, when I'm not reading the Bible. And a lot of people say, they refer to Christianity as this as like a deeply religious type thing, but really, with Christianity, with Jesus Christ, it's a relationship. Like
Right.
Jesus Christ, he's a living God. He's not one that's dead in the ground. Jesus Christ is somebody that you interact with when you have before you have your meal. You you might say that you're thankful for the food and you want you're asking for your blessing over the food, but you're also bringing your problems, your daily things to God, and you're putting your faith in something that you can't see, in someone that you can't see to handle those problems. And so for me, in the morning, right now, my wife and I, we've been talking about adoption, and it's been
Hmm.
something that I think has weighed heavily on her, something that she wants, and it's something that we've talked about in our marriage quite a bit. And I know that that would bring a huge change to our family, and I haven't felt the same push at the same, as she has. But I know
Right.
that God wouldn't push it on her if he wasn't pushing on me, or likewise. So that's something that I have to make sure that I'm praying for, because it's not just about my job, the entire day. I have to remember that the reason I'm here instead of just out there doing nothing, it's I do have a passion for Pokemon, but it's so we can live. We want to be able to live too and have more outside of this. I mean, because Pokemon's just it's not a reality. It's something that we collect, we enjoy, but we have to have some kind of separation from it and remember that the families that we have, or the people that we interact with, they are real and they're real people. And for me, that time in the morning, it's a time of reflection, it's a time of listening, it's a time of searching, and I also get to read words from the best-selling author of all time. You've got Jesus Christ, right? And these words, I mean, they've been around for so long, and yeah, there may be things that people want to try to refute, but I haven't seen a good enough argument yet that is convincing to someone, on to me, especially from a logical side. And usually mathematics and science, that it doesn't really go with Christianity. It doesn't go with, what the Bible says, somebody being inside the whale, a whale for 3 days, or Jesus Christ raising from the dead. But I tell you, if you start thinking about it, like what's the other option? When we die, if
Right.
if
What
there
is
is
it?
nothing else, if there's nothing beyond here, what is your hope for? That your mind just goes into oblivion? Like I think that we are more. I think that we have a purpose here on this earth, and it is God given, and it's from Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of searching, but one of the verses I actually read this morning is God is unsearchable. Like
Mm,
we can't know
that's powerful.
we can't know what he was thinking when he created the universe. We can't understand the ways behind everything that he does, and we can try, and it'll rack at our brains thinking about infinity. That used to get me as a kid. Like, what is infinity? Like,
I was just having that conversation this week.
like what is it? Like, you can't figure it out. I just want to know pi. Like, you can physically define pi, but you can actually prove that it's irrational, by using point, line, and plane, and just coming off these basics. And that in itself is like a paradox. So I don't know. I think we could go really deep, into what is religion, what is the relationship, Jesus Christ, and for me, I think it comes down to what kind of faith do you want to have, and like I said, and I'm not perfect. Nobody is. I make mistakes every day. I'm asking for forgiveness for something, and if I'm not, I'm asking God to search me for what it is that I need to be improving, because we're all human. We all make mistakes, and I think that's the point. We have to come to
Right.
somebody who is greater than us.
And I think you spoke about this really well when you were speaking from your perspective as a childhood, and it was still there in your home every day in
Mhm.
terms of religious, the word of God, but that you felt you needed to seek out more and you needed to get more involved, which is why you went to church and got involved with the youth group. How is that relationship with God and church with your kids? Are you going to church every week? Are you guys sitting at home and, talking through perhaps verses of the Bible? How is that relationship now with you and your kids, given where you came from?
So we are at a local church, Warlick's. They're the
Okay.
same one that we had pushed for the backpack ministry. I want to say it was
Hmm.
early last year, the very beginning of last year. But yeah, we still go Sunday mornings. We go
Okay.
Sunday mornings, and they don't have an evening service anymore. They may come back to that, but we go Wednesdays as well.
Okay.
But one of the ministries that we have is once a week, or not once a week, once a month. We didn't actually do it this past month, but once a month, usually the first Sunday of each month, instead of going to church, we go out and do, we call it just like homeless missions. So there's
Mm.
different areas in Morganton, and there's different areas in Hickory. Me, my wife, and our children, we go right out, and we have pre-prepared lunchbox tins, Pokemon lunchbox tins. Instead of throwing those out, my wife, she usually buys different supplies from Sam's Club or somewhere, and we throw a few Pokemon packs in there too, because it's a great conversation starter.
Right.
Pokemon, it bridges some gaps, but there
Helps
might be like
families.
a fruit cup in there, some utensils. There might be they like a tuna.
Yep.
Trying to think whether there's crackers, there's Slim
Yep.
Jims, things like that. A bottle of water. Basically, you want to give food that they can pop the top off the can and eat it right away.
Right.
You don't want to give them something that they need a can opener for.
Need a tool
And
for. Yeah.
but we'll go find places where we know people might hang out that don't have a home, and we'll go and we'll give them the lunchbox. Like, hey, would you like this? And a lot of times that just opens doors to conversations. Like, you don't have to even start the conversation.
Yeah.
They'll say, "Oh, bless you, thank you so much," and then they'll just go right into their
They'll,
life, and
they'll
they'll just
open
start
it.
talking with you.
Exactly.
And next thing you know,
Yeah.
now you have an opportunity to pray with a complete stranger. Whereas most of the time, if you're driving off the highway and they're standing at the sign, you're probably looking the other way. You're trying not to make that eye contact because you don't want to give them money, because in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking, oh, they're probably going to go buy some cigarettes, or they're going to go buy some alcohol, or hey, they're not going to use this money towards anything good. But the thing is, like, it's not our place to figure out, if they're putting that money optimally into their life. It's
Mm.
our life to, it's our obligation to make sure we're giving them that same love that Christ gave to us. And
Mm.
for us, we don't think it's that handout money mentality that does that. For us, we believe that we want to invest time in them. We want to bring them something that will open the door to us, allowing us to have some time with them. Because if you just show up and you just start talking about things, a lot of times they don't care. I mean, they have
Yeah,
needs that
that's
need
good
to
point.
be met. They,
Yeah.
they're hungry because they slept on a sidewalk last night and they're getting shooed off because they might leave trash there. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, because I do understand businesses have to do things. There are laws against loitering, and you never know, they might be on drugs, and that's something that we also have faith and trust in too, because we
Right.
have three small kids. We
Safety.
might be walking up on somebody who's on drugs, and so a lot of times we have to use a discernment about, hey, this person's over here. They're dancing on top of the brick wall over here. I don't want to
Right.
ignore that person, but maybe my kids should hang back until I have a conversation with them.
Right.
And I tell you, sometimes I prejudge people, and they end up being the most meaningful relationships that I have out of something like that. There's people that we see multiple times, and we found out, through other people that, sometimes they actually speak to others about us, and they've already prepared a way for us when we show up the next month on the first Sunday of the month. And so
That's amazing.
that's in a way where we have a Sunday service that's outside of the walls. It may not be discipleship in the sense that, we're discipling others who believe in Christ, but we're talking to those who are lost, and maybe they just need to see the love of Christ. Maybe they're not
Right.
ready for Jesus yet, but we can plant that seed, and one day it might be ready.
That's a great story, and my wife and I have talked quite a lot about trying to find some similar work in our areas to help those in need. And I love that story coming through your church and being organized that way, but also then involving your kids, because having them experience that and having the ability to give to others and also bring, to your point, those people in need something at that very moment. Um, it may be the thing that saves their life. And if that's something you can contribute to help somebody else out, then by all means, it was worth every single minute and every bit of that conversation. So, love that story, Rusty. It's a great one.
That's something that my wife started up. She had kind of
Really?
pushed that. Yeah. And
Mm,
for a while I was like, yeah, we can try that. And
I'm trying.
then we just kind of, unless you actually put in the effort, whenever you say these
Right.
things, like, they're not going to happen. She's the one who put in the effort to make it happen. And I think I mean, it's great that our kids can come with us. I do remember there was this one time we reached out to a local college, and this was our entire church. Well, not our entire church, but anybody who wanted to come. And
Right.
we had 3 or 4 places with cookies and brownies and stuff, and we were just trying to hand out information, to students and pray with them if we got a chance. And I'd say, students don't care; they just blow by that stuff. But we brought our children with us, Anna
Mm,
and I, and we started going out in the way that, because they were like walking around the area we were at. So
right.
we actually went over there, and we had the kids bring the cookies and the brownies with them in their hands. And you might be able to ignore an adult coming at you, trying to talk to you, just
Right.
get a little bit of your time. But when you have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old little girl in a sundress walking up to you with something,
You're
trying
not
to get
walking
your
away.
attention, you're not going to ignore that. You're going to at least take those brownies. You're going to take the cookies. You're going to say thank you, and then it opened up a lot of doors. It's some people might see having the children there as like a hindrance, somebody you got to watch after. But sometimes you just got to open up your eyes and realize that God has a purpose for them too. And they were the ones who made the impact. They made the difference there with all of the people that we were trying to reach out to, because these were just college students. They were trying to get to class. They didn't care. They didn't want to see this paperwork they were handing out. Hey, there's cookies, great. Somebody might grab them and walk on, but the kids, that made the
Made the
difference with them.
change. Yeah. And I wonder, is there a correlation for this? Let me rephrase that. Do you have a correlation of how religion impacts you and your business as well. When we go back and we just think about for just a moment your Pokemon business, obviously at the start of the day, it sets the tone, it gets you in the right mindset. Obviously, it lays out hopefully everything to be much better. But do you find yourself also throughout the day, whether you're fulfilling orders, to your point earlier, dealing maybe with a customer that's disgruntled, do you find that coming in to kind of help you get through the day?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are so many ways you can run a business, and if I ever have a question about what I should be doing with something, there's usually a pretty easy answer, and it normally doesn't involve me. It doesn't
Right.
involve Rusty getting his way. I've had times where buyers have claimed something I knew was a lie. Like I knew that they were just trying to get their money back, or they were trying to
Yeah.
scam me out of money. And while I will do my best to get justice for something, if somebody comes to me genuinely and they're like, "Hey, my kid got on here and here, I'll give you an example. Somebody
Please.
bought an entire Generation 4 set of tins that I had. It
Mm.
was all the official releases. It was like Rhyperior Level X, Mewtwo Level X. I think it was 28 tins total.
Wow.
Now, I didn't include any like international variations or anything like that, but it was like all the mainstream tins that were released that had Generation 4 Pokemon on the front. And I had shipped it out. They had only paid $1,200, which now seems like not that much, but at the time that was like a mega sale. So they get it. As soon as she gets it in, she's like, "My kids bought this, and I didn't mean to buy this." And usually,
Mm.
when something like that happens, you're like, "Oh, really?"
Right.
This is a big sale for me. I've already paid all the fees on it. I've got the money in. I probably spent it on something else already.
Right.
But they followed up with a message like, "I'm really sorry about this. This puts me in a bind. I don't know how I didn't notice it earlier, but I'm requesting that you take this back." They were honest with me, as honest as I could see, anyways, in the fact that they were admitting it was their fault, but they were
Mm.
asking that I
Right.
would have mercy. I would have grace in this situation. And because they asked, and they didn't come at me like, "Hey, this was a scam," because they could easily just open up item not described or something like that. I was like, "You know what? I'll take it back." And the reason that I went that route is because even though maybe their kid didn't buy it, maybe they just bought it and had buyer's remorse, they were admitting fault. And if they were lying in that situation, then that's not on me. It's on me how I treat the
Right.
situation for what it is and for what I do know. And I can't say that, I've always acted that way with every transaction, but I know when what I'm doing doesn't feel right. If if I had
Right.
approached that situation and I just said no to the refund, then she may have just kept that product, and then I would have remembered that forever as something where I could have possibly made a difference or been, a really bad experience for somebody where
Right.
it puts them in a bind. Because $1,200, if that had been my family, back in the day, $1,200. I mean, that's a whole month's income. That could have been real rough.
Hmm. And I like both there, but also where we spoke about, the homeless person that as you're at the stoplight, where you remove perspectives of what might be and the things you don't know out of your area of assumption and responsibility, and you focus more on just what's the right thing to do, despite if they buy alcohol or drugs, or despite if this person was lying and just bought it and didn't want it anymore when they got it. Um, that really helps to remove, I would say, some of the complexity and what tends to trip us up at times around making those decisions when we think we know what the outcome might be or why they're doing X, Y, or Z. So I like how you separate the two, and you just focus on what's the best thing that I can do in this moment. Yeah. All right, Rusty. We'll bring it to just one or two more, and then we'll bring it to a close. Again, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
We're running almost here up to midnight, so I appreciate it, man. I think both of our eyes are getting a little bit heavy here at the end. I know that family is deeply important to you. You know, you have daughter Sarah, 7. I think Emma is 9 in December. John was 4 in March, if I'm not mistaken. Um, you met your wife in 2010. Been happily married now for well over 10 years. Congratulations, by the way. Um, very similar stories. Oh, I forgot to mention my wife also worked in Hickory. When you mentioned Hickory earlier, I was like, oh wow, my wife actually worked at the Corning facility there. So
Oh yeah.
just kind of touching some memories there. But the family is such a deep part of the why behind what you do. Um, and you even said at one point that when things, not here today, but in a previous conversation, when things start to take up too much of your time, um, you take a step back, whether that was the brick and mortar store, whether that's the consignments, whatever that may be. You say, this is not where I want to be. I'm curious, do you look at that compass internally and say, hey, you know what? I'm not happy with the distribution of my time for my family based on what I've been doing in the business? Or do you tend to maybe not see it as often and you sit down with your wife and your wife says, hey, we've really missed you lately. You've been super busy. We'd love to see you some more. And that kind of starts that light bulb, as you mentioned earlier, and you start to then make the adjustments. Where do you see that really stemming from?
I'd probably say a little bit of both. A
Okay.
lot of it is more internal, I think, because I've got pretty strict hours that I try to keep with my family. Like 5 o'clock is going to be about as late as I work, other than, like a night like this. And anytime I have like a podcast or a live, I check in with my wife. But she keeps me in check pretty good with vacations and things like that. So that's her part of it. Like she was sending me um, messages about doing a Disney trip
Oh,
in
nice.
October, and
Nice.
I honestly, man, if I never went to Disney again, I would be completely fine with that. That place is just miserable to me compared to
Mm,
like going to a park that has a waterfall and I can just go swimming in that and just have no lines, have no waits, go do what I want, not
mm.
be waiting in hot sweaty lines. But the kids love it, and I love being with my kids, and I love being with my wife. Same thing with like it's like a TJ Maxx, Disney's. I'm gonna
Yep.
relate Disney to TJ Maxx. Like I don't want to go to TJ Maxx and shop around for dinosaurs, for the dinosaur themed party wear. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
we know we're not going there for that. We're going to go there for whatever you might see on
Right.
the shelves that the
Exactly.
family could need. But you know what? I don't want to shop for that stuff, so I'm going to go with you, and I want to hang out with you. And me and the kids, we might go check out the toy section, and then we'll sneak up on you, and I'll give you a hug. But when you're not looking, it's one of those things where it's like she keeps me in check because she's always finding stuff for us to do, for this family to do, and
My
I'm
wife's
I'm
the
happy
same
to
way.
go along with that ride. So yeah, she's definitely a part of that process, but she doesn't really critique me on like how much time I spend with work. She's very supportive, and I try to be supportive as I can with her work and her ideas and her time that she wants to spend and go for things. Like she did photography for a while. She's good at it, but she didn't like how much time she had to put in to editing the photos and dealing with the clients and going to these things. So she doesn't do that anymore. But she could open that door again if she wanted. If our kids get grown up. And so there are some checks and balances. I think when you have a marriage. I mean, if you're not always considering the other half, then it's probably not your other half. I mean, really, the way the Bible actually puts it, you are one. When you
Right.
cleave, when you're married, you're no longer two separate people, but you're actually one person, and you got to make sure you take that into account. And some people don't get that. I mean, you know, marriage within the church is just as bad as marriage outside the church. I mean, people divorce all the time because most of the time people are selfish. Like you don't realize how selfish you are until you get married. Like I realized how selfish I was when I got married. There's a lot of things that I thought was my time, my money,
Yep.
my way, and that changes. And you
Yep.
have to compromise. You have to work on things. Everybody's going to argue. You're going to have fights. But what do you do with those fights? We try not to let 24 hours go. With us
Yeah.
perturbed at each other over something. I try not to go to bed, with there being a real issue. I mean, it's not always going to happen like that. It's not rainbows and sunshines everywhere you go, especially in marriage. But you got to remember when
Exactly.
the rain comes, how you work through it. That's what really counts. That's what matters, and hopefully you do it together.
Yeah. Fully agree. Yeah, we try the same. We don't always strike that balance. Sometimes it's just too hot. We have to let the iron cool a little bit, but we definitely strive to not carry any grudges into the next day because it can just impact everything. But definitely there's times where you definitely have time to reflect, come back, and perhaps have the better conversation a day or so later because
Mhm.
things have cooled off. You got to think about the other person's perspective a bit more. You're like, yeah, you know what? I was wrong or you were right or whatever the case may be. Yeah. But yeah, definitely agree. Getting married, especially 10 years of marriage, will change our bachelor life quite a lot. So for those of you that are bachelors, um, just wait until you're married and everything changes. But it's always for the better, in my opinion. And there's struggles there for sure, but it's something I wouldn't change for the world. Yeah, I love it. Love every minute of it. Well, we'll wrap it up with one more, and then we'll have our closing. You speak a lot about time when we do work, when we talk about your business and growth, and you actually even say many times that you want to spend more time with your kids. Are you looking to maybe start to pull back even more? Are you maybe even considering at some point, not now, not even maybe 5 years, but early retirement? I think you're what, 36, 30, something like that, 35, 36?
Yeah,
Right,
I'm 33.
right, right, right. Okay, 33. Okay.
I've thought about it. I mean, really, I mean, I don't put money in stocks or IRAs or anything like that. But this past year, I started putting back a significant portion into a savings account. The only reason I was doing that was because they're paying 5%. I was like, you know what?
Mm,
Why not, right? So
yeah,
I
get
started
some money.
putting money there and seeing the interest come in. It's like, wow,
Mm,
I'm making more money in interest now in a year than my mom was making when I graduated high school, a year.
right,
And it's like, if I keep doing this, could I just live off the interest? And I
exactly.
realized, that could change, with how much interest is being paid or, whatever. But it did start the thoughts turning. It's like, if we're just doing that, what would I do with my life? And honestly, right now with kids, I would probably just do more stuff with the kids. But we wouldn't travel yet, but I do want to travel one day with my wife
Eventually.
once the kids are out of the house and I feel like they're secure and we've just got time, just for us. So I would love to retire early. I would love to step back some more, but right now I'm on the grind and I want to keep the pedal to the metal as much as I can anyways, just so that while I'm young, I can put it in. I can retire a little bit earlier, but I,
Right.
I tell you, it has popped in my mind before just to take a year off. What's the worst that could happen? What if I just took an entire year
Yeah.
off, just stopped selling Pokemon? You know, sure, my YouTube would probably just, it would just do nothing. I might lose,
Yeah.
10% of the subs. My IG, maybe the same thing.
So
My
many things.
eBay, maybe I'd lose my contract with eBay, but so what? I could come back the next year and just sell or send to the eBay vault. It's like worst case scenario. I mean, it wouldn't be that bad, but I'd have a whole year off. Like how
What
many people could
what
say
could you
they
do
took
in
an
that year?
entire year off and did nothing as
Yeah.
an adult? And it might be fun. I don't know. Maybe, but then would I come back? Would I come back the same? I mean, I don't know. It's fun to think about all that stuff, but then you get up in the morning and you're like, "Ah, I got to answer those emails. Let me just do that. Maybe I'll
Let me do this
daydream
one. Yeah.
another time."
Well, and it's funny because if you're gonna take a decision such as that, you'd have to cut the switches off, in advance, because the machine's moving at this point, and unless you cut it off and you stop the orders from coming in and you just finalize what's there, you you're always gonna find something to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, toy the idea. Maybe pull the string on that light bulb a little bit and see what happens for us. You might make some memories you'll never forget. But don't leave the hobby. We need you, man. We need you. All right, man. We'll wrap it up. We have two closing questions. The first one will be, temptations, Rusty, are everywhere in life, and staying, in the path of light, is challenging at times for many people, all of us really. What advice would you give to those that are at that fork in the road and they're trying to stay, out of the darkness? That's a very generic way of wording this, and I did it on purpose because obviously everybody's situation is very specific. But looking at it from that point of view, um, what would be some of your advice to help people make those right turns when that fork in the road comes?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about light and dark, I mean, I just had a whole week of studying light with how we're supposed to be the light of the world
Mm,
as Christians. As Jesus is the light, and we're supposed to be like Him. So the easy answer is right there. So I mean, that would be
right.
where I would say turn to Jesus. I mean, you've got. I bet you could find so many different ways that people could teach you on that. Um, but the Bible, I mean, I just start in Matthew. You got Matthew, Mark, Luke, John right there. You got the four Gospels. Send me an email, or I can send you my pastor's number. He'd love to talk to you. But I don't know why, but something specifically popped in my head. Like when you said
Please, yeah.
temptations, I know a lot of people are tempted by what they see online,
Mm,
what they see in movies and TV shows, and
right.
if you're being tempted in any seductive way and something like that, you know, one of the things the Bible actually tells us to do is to flee from sexual sin. It's one of the few things
Mm,
that we're told to flee from. It's something that you actively have to flee from. So like, here's an example. When I'm at a beach, when I'm at a beach, it's pretty easy to forget that you've got all these women running around in their underwear. I mean, they got
right.
on bikinis, and so it's easy to also see one of those bikinis and to linger. You need to make sure that you're shielding your eyes, you're shielding yourself, and this doesn't just apply to like this specific example when you're looking at a woman, but it can apply to any aspect of your life where you're being tempted from
Mm,
something that you know is harmful to you, whether it be drugs, whether it be something food. For me, I love eating food, and if I start gaining weight, it is going to be detrimental to my health. I will tell you that. So far I haven't yet, but one day it's going to happen. Whatever your temptation may be, you have to be an active participant in making sure that it doesn't affect you. Like, you got to take care of yourself. When we go by the Victoria's Secret in the mall, and I'm with my kids and my wife, I make sure that they know. Well, when I'm just my kids, like, you have to shield yourself. It's
mm,
easy to look in there and to wonder what's
right.
going on with those clothing and stuff, but that is dishonoring to my wife. She is right there beside me, and even if she wasn't, people know that I am a married man, and I shouldn't be looking or thinking about that kind of stuff in a sexual way, especially if I'm sure there's harmless ways that you can buy things for your wife, and I'm not saying that, but I want my children to know that as a
Right.
husband, that's what they need to expect too out of the person that they are going to marry one day. The way that I treat their mother is what they're going to see a husband as. The way
Exactly.
my wife treats me, that's going to be the mother role model that they have. So everything that you do is going to affect other people. But even though it's a temptation for yourself, there are impacts that are greater than that as well. So if you're teetering on something and you don't know which way to go, you're not sure about it, you have to get yourself a plan. And if you need somebody to help you out, reach out to somebody that you can trust. And it's very important, especially with like forgiveness in Christianity, that you have somebody that you confess to. It's a big difference between, while you can confess just only to Jesus Christ, if you confess to somebody else, it's going to make it a whole lot more easy to be held accountable for your actions, for what
Mm,
you're doing, and they can also help you with whatever that addiction is. And
I
I
can
don't know if
vice
that's where
versa.
you're going with that, so I tried to cover a few different things there.
Yeah, you did. You covered all of it. No, but that's exactly where I was going. Um, yeah, having that helpline, having that person or that people that you can reach out to that hold you accountable. I really like that last part as well. But the temptations of life are all there, whether it be sexual or be otherwise. And trying to, and I like the phrase you use, to shield your eyes, but also shield your mind, to shield in a sense, the way the kids see the world. Not in the sense of overprotecting them so they don't have exposure and they can't, obviously operate on their own, but to know what to expect, as you said. I think that is a critical point of the answer that you gave, and truly and deeply love the way you delivered it. So well done, sir. Well done. The last point will be, or last question will be the one I do for everybody here, Rusty. So we'll bring it finally to the close exactly at the time here. So appreciate it, my friend. We all leave the hobby one day, Rusty. Hopefully gracefully and hopefully happily. But when we do leave, what legacy do you hope to leave in the hobby when you're gone?
I don't know. Guess I never really think about some of these questions. People ask me like what my favorite Pokemon is, and that one always trips me up. My wife asked me what my favorite color is. I don't have a favorite color, but a legacy left behind. I wish I had something deep to tell you, but I don't know if there is really anything.
That's okay.
Like if from a business perspective, something that I always found was great to have is good competition makes for like a good hobby. So like we always tried to work with people that they were like in direct competition with me, but
Right.
they were I could trust them. But like Rock Carolina, I don't like that was a guy that I talked with about earlier. Me and him, we would sell the exact same things. I would sell things to him that, and knowing full well that he was probably going to undercut me, but he would do the exact same thing back to me. And it ended up and like it always worked out for us both. It was like him having those sales. Like if he didn't get the sale, I might have gotten the sale. And it was we sold the same types of things. He ended up going into Chick-fil-A. He's a man. He has his own standalone store now. I got to be a reference for him to get in there. Like they called me up, and it was just kind of cool. But and it's been like that with most of the people that I know that are in the hobby, like Dan and Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nick, I've known for a long time. We've always sold a lot of the same stuff. We've been interested in the same things, but even now, like he helps me out with deals, and I try to send people his way as well. And like with eBay, I try to recommend people to eBay that I believe would be assets to them to get deals. And even though I realize that could cut into my own sales, or they could be selling the exact same things that I'm selling, they're good competition, and I think that makes for the community, right? Everybody's trying to avoid that word now, but it makes for the overall hobby for Pokemon better,
Right.
because if you have good people in here, then it's going to bring more people back because they're having good business experiences. So
I
I
like
hope
that.
that people just see that, you know.
Healthy business. Healthy competition equals healthy business equals healthy hobby. Yeah. Good way to look at it. Well, my friend, as I said, I won't give you any more. We're just a little bit over. Want to sincerely, once again, just thank you for your time running here 3 hours deep. Really do appreciate it. And as always, we thank everybody else that's watching now or afterwards for their time. It's something we don't get back, and we treasure it deeply here on Pokemon Wonder. So, Rusty, thank you. I really appreciate it. Keep in touch. We'll talk again soon. And for everybody else, have a great night. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on the next Rants, everybody. Thanks.